Hello, and thank you for choosing this clean, historical Western romance by Emma Ashwood. Before we begin, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support allows us to keep sharing more wonderful stories for free. So grab a cozy spot, kick back, and let this story whisk you away to a different time and place. Enjoy. Copyright Emma Ashwood. The Orphan Train to Nebraska by Emma Ashwood. Chapter 1. The orphan train came into Loup Crossing on a raw spring morning, hissing steam against a low gray sky. Lily Keeney stood at the edge of the platform with her shawl pulled tight against the wind. She had told herself she came to town for thread. That was a lie, and she knew it. She had come, like everyone else, to see the children. Half the county was there before her. Wagons stood 3 deep along the street, teams stamping in the cold, while families in Sunday clothes pressed toward the Grange Hall. Word had run through the sandhills for 2 weeks. Children were coming from New York City. Orphans, the notices said, healthy and well-mannered, offered to good Christian homes. Beyond the depot, the hills rolled away, pale with last year's grass, dune after grassy dune to the edge of the world. It was a hard country in spring. The wind never rested, the roads were sand, and the nearest neighbor could be half a day off. What a city child would make of it, Lily could not imagine. She followed the crowd inside. The hall smelled of lamp oil, wet wool, and strong coffee. Benches had been pushed back against the walls. At the front stood the low stage the Grange used for speeches, swept clean for the occasion. On that stage, in a straight line, stood 14 children. They had been scrubbed until they shone. The boys wore stiff new caps and jackets a size too large. The girls wore braids pulled so tight their eyes watered. Every small face carried the same look, a careful blankness, like goods set out on a counter waiting to be handled. Something in Lily's chest turned over at the sight of them. The placing out agent was a narrow man in a black coat with a ledger under one arm and a watch chain across his front. He spoke of the society, of papers and terms, of the Christian goodness of the families gathered here today. His voice was smooth from long practice. Then he stepped back, swept out a hand, and the choosing began. It was not cruel, exactly. Lily kept telling herself so. These were plain, hard-pressed people who needed hands more than they needed sentiment. Even so, she watched a farmer squeeze a boy's arm the way he would squeeze a horse's foreleg, and her stomach tightened. "Good strong back on this one," the farmer said. His wife nodded, then looked at the boy's teeth. Down the line the families moved, weighing, murmuring, comparing. A tall girl was chosen for kitchen work by a woman with 6 men to feed. 2 brothers went together to a wheat man from up north, which the agent called a blessing. A small boy in spectacles was passed over 3 times. The minister's sister took him at last, saying the Lord had a use for readers too. One by one, the line grew shorter. Near its end stood a dark-haired boy of 10 or so, wiry as a fence post, his jaw set hard against the room. Beside him stood a little girl of 6 at the most, small and fair, with enormous eyes, clutching a rag doll to her chest. Her hand was folded inside her brother's hand as if it had grown there. Lily could not stop looking at them. The boy watched the crowd the way a dog watches a raised stick. Whenever a family drew near the little girl, he moved himself half a step in front of her. He did it quietly. He did it every single time. Then Michael Wright came through the press of people. Lily knew him only a little, the way everyone in a thin, settled county knows everyone a little. He homesteaded 10 miles northeast of her own claim, a big man, dark and weather-hardened, with a stillness on him that the town called coldness. A fever had taken his wife some years back, and his small son with her. Since then, he worked a place far too large for one man, and he spoke to almost nobody. He stopped in front of the dark-haired boy. "Name?" Michael asked. "Danny Flynn." The boy's voice was flat and steady. "Sir? How old?" 10. "You ever worked?" "Since I could walk." Michael looked him over the way a man looks over a plow, checking for cracks. Anyone could see he needed help on that big lonesome place, and a man could tell himself that help was all he needed. His shut gray face said he was telling himself exactly that. "He'll do," Michael said to the agent. "The boy, just the boy." The agent came briskly with his ledger. Papers were spread on a bench, a pen was produced, terms were read out. It was all so quick, so ordinary, like the buying of nails. Danny did not move. "Sadie comes too," he said. The agent's smile thinned. "The gentleman has asked for one boy. She's my sister." Danny's hand tightened around the small fingers inside it. "We stay together. I told the man in Omaha. I told him twice. Placements are made as homes offer, young man. Girls are wanted farther down the line. She will be looked after. She stays with me." Through all of it, Michael stood silent, a big shadow with his hat in his hand. Once he looked at the little girl, quickly, then away, as a man looks away from a debt he does not mean to pay. "Come along now, boy," the agent said. What happened next, Lily would hear in her sleep for years. The agent took Danny by the shoulder. A second man from the society took the girl, gently enough, only meaning to move her back a step. Their hands came apart. That was all it was. Two children's hands coming apart in a crowded hall. Sadie began to scream. It was not a child's tantrum. It was nothing Lily had a name for at all. The sound came up out of the little body like something torn loose. One raw note, then another, then another. Her arms reached for her brother. The rag doll dropped to the boards at her feet. Danny fought. Slight as he was, it took both men to hold him, and still he half dragged them across the stage. "Sadie," he shouted. "Sadie, I'm here. I'm right here." "Danny!" she screamed back. "Danny! Danny!" Underneath the screaming, the hall went very quiet, the way a crowd goes quiet at a bad accident, and the families began to melt away. Lily saw it happen. Mothers drew back their skirts. Fathers found something to study in their hats. Near the stage, a woman who had been asking after a girl for company turned to her husband. One small shake of her head. Nobody wanted a hysterical child. Nobody wanted a scream like that carried into their house, as if it might move in with her and never stop. The agent crouched and tried to hush her. He offered a peppermint. He spoke brightly of the nice train and the nice new town. Sadie screamed on. She screamed until her voice broke. Then she kept on screaming with what was left of it. By the door, Michael Wright rested his hand on Danny's shoulder, not gripping, only holding him there. His face might have been cut from sod for all that it showed. Lily stood close enough to hear the agent speak low to the society man. She was not meant to hear it. She heard it all the same. "She'll have to go on down the line. Kearney, perhaps. If nobody takes her there, she goes back east with the leftovers." The leftovers. Lily's hands closed into fists inside her shawl. She thought of her claim, 10 miles of sand road away, with its brackish well and its unpaid accounts. She thought of the ledger on her table that would not balance, no matter how she worked the figures. And the town already had its name for her, the widow too proud to quit. What would it call her tomorrow if she took this child? A woman alone, they would say. Barely feeding herself, taking on a child she has no business taking. All of that was true. Every word of it was true. Then Sadie's voice cracked out again, small and wrecked, to nobody now, to the room, to the whole world. "Danny, I want Danny." Lily knew that cry. She had made it herself 18 months back, into a pillow in an empty soddy over a young husband the fever took in 9 days. To have your other half torn living out of your side with no goodbye worth the name. She knew precisely, exactly what that was. She was crossing the floor before she had decided to cross it. Her boots sounded loud on the boards. Faces turned. The agent straightened, the peppermint still in his hand. "Ma'am, I'll take her." Lily's voice came out steadier than her heart. "The girl, I will sign for her." The agent looked her over, at the patched shawl, at the sun-browned hands. "You would be Mrs. Keeney, Lily Keeney. I hold a claim south of town, proving up next year. I keep hens, a cow, a good garden." Her chin came up. "The child will be fed and schooled. She will be loved. Show me where I sign." Somebody in the crowd murmured. Whether it was admiration or pity, Lily did not stay to learn. But first she went to the child. Sadie had gone down in a small heap on the stage boards, still screaming in ragged, failing pulses, her face swollen shut with crying. Lily knelt, gathered up the fallen doll, then gathered up the girl herself, doll and all, hard against her shoulder. The screaming stumbled, caught, went on softer into her collar. "There now," Lily said, over the small head. "There, I have you." The papers were signed with the child on her hip. Papers are quick, she thought, for the largest things. A name, a date, a line for her hand. She wrote Lily Keeney where the agent's finger pointed, one-handed. The pen scratched once. It was done. Her name is Sadie, said a voice from the door. Danny stood there with Michael's hand still on his shoulder. His eyes were dry now. Somehow that was worse than the screaming had been. He looked at Lily the way a drowning man looks at a stranger standing on the bank. The doll is called Mrs. Pig, he said. Sadie won't sleep without her. She takes honey in her milk when she can get it. She's scared of dogs, but only the big ones. His voice never rose and never broke. He was giving his sister up one small fact at a time. It was the only way a boy could bear it. Danny, Lily said, I will keep her safe. You have my word on it. Where? He asked. Where do you live? The agent stepped in then, smooth as butter, saying placements were not to be discussed, that it only unsettled the children. The ledger closed with a snap. Michael turned his boy toward the door. For one moment his eyes met Lily's across the hall, gray meeting gray, and what passed between them was not friendliness. It was nearer to blame, though neither one could have said whose. Then the door swung shut, and the boy was gone. Against her shoulder, Sadie's fist wound tighter into her collar, small as a sparrow, gripping hard enough to hurt. Danny, the little girl whispered. There was nothing left in her voice at all. I want Danny. Lily settled the child higher on her hip, doll and all. I know, little one, she said softly over the small head. I know. Outside, the whistle blew, long and lonesome, as the empty orphan train pulled away west across the hills. Chapter 2. The road home ran 10 miles through the sandhills, and Sadie did not speak for one step of it. Lily drove with the reins in one hand and her other arm around the child. The wagon rocked through the soft going, up one pale hill and down the next, while the wind combed the old grass flat. Overhead the sky hung low and gray as dishwater. Now and then a meadowlark sang somewhere out in all that emptiness, thin and far away. That's a lark, Lily said. You'll hear plenty of those come summer. Nothing. There's a cow at home. Her name is Maud. She's gentle as butter, though she has no manners at supper. Nothing still. The little girl sat pressed against her side, gripping the rag doll, her swollen eyes fixed on the road behind them. Lily understood soon enough what the child was watching for. She was watching the road back to town. She was holding it in her mind so she would not lose it. Toward evening, the soddy came in sight, low and brown in the fold of two hills. The barn stood beyond it, the windmill turning slow against the sky. Grass grew on its roof. From a distance, the whole place looked like something the land had grown itself, rather than anything built by hands. Here we are, Lily said, too brightly. Home. Sadie looked at the house made of dirt, and her chin began to shake. Inside, Lily lit the lamp and stirred the stove up from its banked coals. The room was small and clean. A bed in the corner, a table scrubbed white, a curtain across one end. Her husband's coat still hung on its peg because she had never learned how to take it down. The lamplight turned the whitewashed walls a warm yellow, and the wind stayed outside, muttering along the eaves. Supper was cornbread with honey, in honor of what Danny had said, with warm milk besides. Sadie ate 3 bites. Then she laid her head down on her arms, right at the table, as if her small neck had given out at last. That night, Lily made her a nest of quilts close by the stove, tucked Mrs. Pig in beside her, and sat near until the child's breathing evened. She had just reached her own bed when the crying began. It was not loud. That was the terrible part. The screaming in the Grange hall had been a storm. This was rain that meant to fall all night, small and steady, muffled in the quilts. One word, over and over, worn soft as a creek stone. Danny. Danny. Lily lay in the dark listening, and her own chest ached like a fresh wound. For she knew this. That was what nobody at the Grange Hall could have told her, signing that paper. She knew this crying from the inside. 18 months ago, the fever had come through the county, taking the old and the strong alike. Her husband was 29 years old, with shoulders that could carry a calf, and it took him in 9 days. On the first day, he laughed about it. On the 9th, she closed his eyes with her own hand. They had broken this claim together, cut every strip of sod in these walls together. Then the wagon came from town. After that, she was one person, where there had been 2. The town had waited ever since for her to quit. A woman alone could not prove up a claim. They said it at the store, at the church, said it kindly and often. Go back east, Mrs. Keeney. Go home to your people. She stayed. She stayed because the man she loved lay on the rise behind the barn, under a wooden cross she had painted white. To leave the claim was to leave him. It was as simple as that, and she had never once tried to make it sound more sensible than it was. But she knew what it cost, staying. Nobody had to teach her the arithmetic of it, which was why, lying in the dark, she asked herself plainly what she had done. She could scarcely feed one mouth off this hard ground. The well was going brackish. The account at the store was longer than she liked to think about, and her seed money for spring was thinner. Onto that pile she had now laid a 6-year-old girl, a stranger, city-born, half-broken with grief. One more impossibility thing on a long list of impossibilities. The crying went on, small as rain. Finally, Lily got up, crossed the cold floor, and gathered the child into the rocking chair, quilts, doll, everything. Sadie did not fight her. She curled in against Lily's shoulder like something washed up on a bank, still crying, too worn out to wonder whose arms these were. Back and forth the chair went, creaking softly. Outside, the windmill clanked twice in the wind and stilled. "I know," Lily murmured against the small, damp head. "I know what you cried for. Better than anybody, I know." They stayed that way a long time. Toward dawn, the wind died the way it always did before sunup. Gray light came into the room little by little, finding the table, the coat on its peg, the two of them in the chair. Lily's arm had gone numb below the elbow. She did not move it. Some things matter more than an arm. The days that followed taught Lily the shape of the child's grief, the way you learn a new field, one hard row at a time. Sadie ate little and spoke less. She answered questions with a nod or with nothing. She would not go near Maud, nor the hens, nor the barn cat who came courting her ankles at milking time. Mostly, she stood at the south window, the one that looked back up the road toward town, with Mrs. Pig hanging from one fist, waiting, holding the road back in her mind. Twice a day, Lily set food in front of her, and twice a day carried most of it away again. She tried honey in the milk. There were songs while she worked, the ones her own mother had sung. She cut a string of paper dolls from an old newspaper. Sadie looked at them politely, the way a grown woman looks at a peddler's buttons, then turned back to the window. Only at night did the child come to life, and then only to cry. On the fourth evening, over another untouched plate, Lily set down her fork. "Look at me, child." Slowly, the huge eyes came up. "I'm not going to tell you to stop grieving," Lily said. "Folks told me that once, and I never forgave a one of them. You cry all you need to, but you will eat, because you are mine to keep now, and I keep what's mine." She pushed the plate an inch closer. 4 bites, then we'll call it a truce." For a long moment the girl studied her, the way a small, wary animal studies an open hand. Then she picked up her spoon. 4 bites became 5. Lily looked wisely out the window and said nothing at all. Afterward, the girl let herself be shown the hens. She would not touch one, but she watched them a long while from the doorway, with Mrs. Pig held tight beneath her chin, and Lily counted that a victory too. That night the crying came again, and again Lily rose to rock her. It was becoming their custom, the two of them, and the creaking chair, awake together in the dark heart of the night. And rocking there, Lily found her own grief rising to keep the child's grief company. She had thought she was through the worst of it. 18 months of work had packed the wound down hard, the way feet pack a path. But this small body, crying for its other half, opened it all again. She caught herself listening for a step that would never come across the yard. She sat with the pain, in the room his hands had built, and let the tears run quietly where the child could not see. 2 mourners in one chair, she thought. Lord, what a household! Sadie's crying wore itself down toward sleep. In the last of it, half dreaming, the girls spoke more words together than she had spoken in 4 days. "Danny walks me," she mumbled into Lily's collar, "when it's dark. Danny always walks me." "Walks you where, little one?" "Everywhere, so I'm not scared." A hiccup. "Who walks him?" Lily's throat closed. There was no answer to give, so she gave none. She only held on, rocking while the lamp burned low. Her mind went to the wiry, flat-voiced boy 10 miles east, giving his sister up one small fact at a time. She's scared of dogs, but only the big ones. A boy who thought of that, with 2 men's hands on his shoulders, holding him back from her. Who walked him, indeed. Nobody. Nobody walked either one of them now. She had not meant to take a child. She had meant to buy thread and come home. The whole of it had happened the way a prairie fire happens. One gust, one spark, a single minute changing the look of every year to come. Whatever possessed you, Lily Keeney, the town would say, and was likely saying already over its suppers. Mercy possessed me, she answered them in her head. Mercy and memory. Sadie slept at last, heavy and damp against her shoulder. One small fist stayed knotted in Lily's sleeve, as if the night itself might try to pull them apart. Lily sat very still and looked down at her, at the wet lashes, at the doll trapped in the crook of one arm. Then at that fist, gripping her sleeve past the edge of sleep, holding on to whatever was nearest and had not yet gone away. Something turned over in Lily then, slow and heavy, like sod turning off the plow. She had signed a paper in the Grange Hall. She had understood it as a rescue, a roof, bread, schooling, a bed by the stove. Sitting in the dark with that small fist in her sleeve, she understood it differently at last. The understanding frightened her more than the ledger ever had. A roof was not what the girl cried for. Bread was not what the girl cried for. Every night, in the smallest voice on earth, the child named the one thing she wanted. It was the one thing Lily had not given her. 10 miles east, in a silent house with a man folks called Cold, Lily thought of her husband on the rise, of the platform, of two hands coming apart. She thought of how the county would laugh, a widow with no seed money, setting herself against the Children's Aid Society, against distance and weather, against a shut-faced homesteader twice her size. Then she looked down again at the fist in her sleeve. "All right," she whispered, to the sleeping child, to the lamp, to the wind over the roof. "All right, then. I don't know how, but I will mend what they tore, little one. If it takes me years, I'll see you mended." The windmill clanked twice in the darkness, as if signifying agreement. She carried Sadie to the warm nest by the stove, tucked the quilts close, and set Mrs. Pig where the first morning light would find her. Then she stood a while in the middle of her one small room, a slight woman in a mended nightgown, sworn to an impossible thing, one more impossibility on the list. Lily put out the lamp and went to bed. Chapter 3. Michael Wright's place lay east of Loup Crossing, in a wide green bowl among the hills. Every rod of it had been bought with sweat. He drove the last stretch in silence, the boy on the seat beside him. Good fence ran along the road, tight and true. Fat cattle grazed the low ground by the creek. The house stood white-painted on its rise, built of board lumber hauled 50 miles. Beyond it stood a barn bigger than the house, with a windbreak of young cottonwoods in soldier rows. A stranger would have called it a fine place. A stranger would have been right as far as strangers see. "Barn first," Michael said, the first words in an hour. "Stock gets seen to before people. That's the rule here." "Yes, sir," Danny said. They put up the team together. The boy moved quick and quiet, no wasted steps, watching how Michael did each job once, then doing it that way himself. He hung the harness where it belonged without being told twice. 10 years old, slight as a lath, with hands already hard. He would do. That was all Michael required of him. That was all this was. Inside, the house was bare and scrubbed clean. A stove, a table, 2 chairs, one of them dusty. Shelves with pans in rows, no curtains, no pictures, nothing on the walls at all. One room scoured to its boards and kept that way, like a tool a man no longer loves but will not let rust. Michael jerked his chin at a bunk in the corner, ready with 2 folded blankets. "Yours. Chores are these." He said them slowly, counting on his fingers. Stock fed and watered, cow milked, eggs gathered, wood split, water hauled, fence walked when told. "You eat what I eat. School in winter if the weather lets you. Sundays we rest mostly. Work honest, and there'll be no trouble between us. Understood?" "Yes, sir." Supper's beans. That was the whole of the speech he had prepared, and it had lasted not 2 minutes. They ate at the table, the man at one end, the boy at the other. The lamp hissed between them, and outside the wind fingered the eaves. Neither one said a word. The clock on the shelf sounded loud in all that quiet. The boy ate everything, neatly, like a man paying a debt. When his plate was clean, he carried it to the basin without being asked. Then he sat back down, folded his hands, and waited to be told what came next. 10 years old, and already nobody's child. Michael turned away from that thought and trimmed the lamp. Hired help, Michael told himself, watching the small head bent over the plate. 2 hands to ease the work, nothing more than that. In the Grange hall, he had said it firmly to himself, with the girls screaming going through the room like a saw through wet wood. He said it again now. He was a practical man. This was a practical arrangement, and there was nothing more in it to look at. A man can build a fence to keep the world out. He can build one inside himself, too, to keep from looking at his own hurt. The boy was everything a man could have asked. Michael learned that in the first week. Danny rose before him, which no hand had ever done. Every morning, Michael woke to hear the pump already working, the tin pail already ringing in the barn. The boy worked through cold and wet without one word of complaint. He ate what was set in front of him, washed his own plate, went to his bunk when the lamp was blown. Nothing had to be told him twice. Some things never had to be told him once. He was quiet, not sullen, nothing a man could correct, only shut, his small face closed like a fist around something. All his grief carried down out of sight, like water at the bottom of a well. Michael did not ask about it. Asking questions opened a man up. Michael had shut that part of himself away long ago, and he meant to keep it shut. What the boy carried was the boy's to carry. Every man on earth carried something. You worked with it, you slept with it. In time you carried it like a yoke, and nobody was owed the story. So the two of them worked, side by side, day upon day, in a silence like deep snow. Spring came on around them while they worked. The hills turned from pale straw to gray-green, and the cattle spread along the creek like spilled beads. New grass blazed up in the low ground. Calves came and were seen to. A late frost came and was weathered. It was the kind of season a man could lose himself in, which was the only kind Michael prized. And the work was good. Michael would have said that much aloud if there had been anyone to say it to. Fence went up faster with a boy to hold wire. The woods split ahead of the weather for the first time in years. In the evenings, the lamp burned over 2 bent heads, one mending harness, one oiling boots. The clock had something to tick against at last. That was the bargain he had made, he told himself. Labor, 2 hands. He knew the truth well enough. He kept it at the edge of his mind and would not look at it. The truth was that he had not driven to Loup Crossing that raw morning because fence wire wanted holding. He had driven in because of the silence. 3 years ago, this house had held 3 voices, his own, his wife's, singing over the stove, off the note and not caring, and his son's, 4 years old, asking why at the world from daylight to dark. Then the fever came through the county. Inside of one single week, from first cough to last shovelful, Michael Wright buried all of it on the rise behind the house. His wife in one grave, his boy in a small one beside her. The county had watched him for a year, the way you watch a tree the lightning has struck, waiting to see whether it lives. He lived. Work was the only way he knew, so he worked. Every soft thing went out of the house because every soft thing had her hands on it. What a man cannot bear, he had better not look at. Her garden by the south wall he let go under the weeds for the same reason. Grief got plowed under like stubble, season after season. He fenced it, roofed it, hauled it, split it. When the neighbors spoke kindly to him at church, he answered so short they quit, and he told himself he was glad. But a house is patient. A house waits all day, and at night when the tools are hung up, it says what it has to say. For 3 years, the silence in that scoured room had been eating him alive one supper at a time. So he had gone to town, where the train was bringing children nobody owned. He had picked out the sturdiest boy on the line, and he had called it hiring. Labor, he told himself, watching Danny carry the milk through the blue dawn. Nothing more. He was a strong man, and he had gotten good at not looking at things. But he was not quite good enough not to know he was doing it. The boy asked his question on the 9th day. They were stretching wire on the south line, just the 2 of them, with the wind laying the grass flat in long silver waves. Danny held the strand while Michael stapled. The boy had been quiet all morning, even for him. Twice Michael had caught him looking away west, past the hills, at nothing a man could see. "Sir," Danny said, "my sister." Michael's hammer stopped a half-second, then struck. "The lady that took her," the boy went on, level and careful, each word set down like a foot on river ice. "Do you know her?" Do you know where Sadie's at? The wind moved in the grass. Michael took 2 staples from between his lips, which bought him time, and drove them both before he answered. Placement's done, he said. Society settled it. It can't be helped now, and there's no use stirring it. She's with a decent woman, and you're better letting it lie. Both of you are. He nodded at the wire. Take up the slack. For a moment the boy did not move. Something crossed the small, shut face then. Not tears, nothing so simple as tears. It was more like a light showing deep in the boy's eyes for one moment, there and gone. Yes, sir, Danny said, and took up the slack. The words rang wrong in Michael's own ears all afternoon. It can't be helped. He had said such things before. Folks had said them to him 3 years back, standing around the raw earth on the rise in their church clothes. It couldn't be helped. It was God's will. Let it lie, Wright. Time mends. He had hated every mouth that said such words. Now he had said them himself. Supper that evening was quieter than usual, which was saying a good deal. Twice Michael looked up, meaning to speak, though he could not have said what. Twice the boy's shut face turned the words back at the door. The clock ticked. The wind worked at the eaves. Between them, unmentioned, as real as a third plate, sat the little sister 10 miles west. He stapled wire, hard, and put the thought under, the way he put everything under. That evening, while Michael milked, the boy carried scraps to the hogs and was slow coming back. Through the barn door, in the last red light, Michael could see him standing out past the corrals where the trail came in. Just standing, a small, dark figure in a big, empty country, looking west along the wheel ruts. Grieving, Michael supposed. Well, the boy did his work. He could stand where he liked. What Michael could not see from the barn, with his forehead against the cow's warm flank, was the whole of it. Out at the trail's edge, where the road ran off toward Loup Crossing, Danny Flynn crouched down. On a big, flat stone, he set a smaller one, the size of his fist. He had been keeping count since the Grange Hall, quietly, the way he kept his griefs. The turns the wagon had made, the look of the hills against the sun, and the one great cottonwood at the fork, 3 miles gone, where the water lay. The lady with the gray eyes had driven south from town. He had heard the agent say Keeney to somebody, and heard somebody say the widow's place down south. 10 miles of open hills lay between him and wherever that was. He set a second stone against the first, pointing the way. Then he stood, dusting his knees like any boy done with chores. It could not be helped, the man said. Danny looked west down the darkening ruts a last time, measuring, remembering, and his jaw set exactly as it had set on the platform. He would help it himself. Chapter 4. 3 nights later, Michael woke to a wrong kind of quiet. He lay in the dark a moment, listening for what was missing. No pump working in the yard, no pail ringing in the barn. For 9 days the boy had been up before him, every single morning, steady as sunrise. The bunk in the corner was empty. The blankets were folded square. Danny? The word fell flat in the scoured room. Michael was into his boots inside a minute, out the door into the gray before dawn. His breath hung frosted as he called across the yard. The barn was empty of him. So was the loft. The hog pen, the hen house, the windbreak, the creek. Michael went through them all once fast, then once slow. The whole time something was climbing up through his chest that he had not felt in 3 years. He had prayed never to feel it again. A small bed, empty. A small voice, gone out of a house. Not again. The words came up from somewhere below, thinking, please, not again. He told himself the boy had run off, the way placed-out boys did. Took bread and struck for the railroad. Boys did it every season. The county was littered with such stories, and no fault laid on the man that housed them. Then he thought of wells. He thought of the creek running snow-cold, of loose stock, of 10,000 hills exactly alike. Somewhere among them was a city child who had never been out of sight of a lit window. The country was no yard to wander in. Grown men had gone missing between one line camp and the next, to be found in June. Michael saddled the bay with hands that would not go fast enough. Past the corrals, where the trail came in from the county road, he found the sign. Small boot prints in the sand, night crisp at the edges. Striking off southwest into the open hills, not wandering. Not staggering about, lost. Walking, one print after another, pointed like a compass needle. He sat the saddle a moment, reading them, and understanding came over him cold. Toward the widow Keeney's claim, 10 miles of trackless sandhills away, where the society's ledger had carried one small girl. "You little fool," Michael said aloud to the empty hills, to the boot prints, to the ache standing in his own throat. "You could have died." He put the bay after them at a long trot. All the way, through the climbing morning, the tracks showed him what the boy's night had been. Here Danny had stopped on a hilltop, feet turning a slow circle, taking his stars or his bearings. There the prints crossed a wet swale and came out the far side no longer quite straight. Michael's jaw set hard at the sight. 10 miles in the dark, through country that swallowed men. An hour of it would have turned most boys around. The prince never once turned around. 2 hills short of the Keeney place, he stopped needing them because there was nothing between him and the soddy but morning. Smoke stood up straight from her stovepipe. The windmill turned slow. It was a poor place set against his own, one low sod house and a scrap of barn. But the yard was swept. The fence stood plumb, and every inch of it said fight. Michael rode in slowly, the way you ride into another man's yard, and before he could hail the house, the door opened. The widow stood in it with her sleeves rolled and her gray eyes lit like struck flint. "Well," Lily Keeney said. "The man himself. Ma'am," he took off his hat. "I believe my boy's here." "Your boy." She said the 2 words the way you set 2 stones on a scale. "Come and see, then. Come see what you signed for at that hall, Mr. Wright, since it can't be helped." His own words carried 10 miles and handed back to him. Michael got down and followed her, stooping through the low door. The soddy was one warm room, whitewashed, poor and clean. At the table, in the full yellow of the lamp, sat what he had ridden all morning, dreading and hoping for. Danny was asleep, sitting up. His head lay on his crossed arms among the breakfast dishes, dead to the world, a piece of bread still in one fist. The boots had been set to dry by the stove. His feet were wrapped in flannel strips, and a quilt had been laid over his shoulders by somebody gentle. Against his side, tucked under his arm like something that had grown there, slept the little girl. Her doll had fallen to the floor. One of her hands was closed around a fold of her brother's jacket, gripping it in her sleep, holding on even from wherever she was. Michael stood with his hat in his hands and could not speak. The stove ticked. Bacon and coffee stood cooling where plates had been pushed aside to make room for a boy's head. Over by the window sat the widow's mending basket, spilled sideways, given up hours ago. Every homely inch of the room told what the night here had been. "He came out of the dark at first light," Lily said, low behind him. "I heard the hens fussing and took up the poker, thinking fox. It was a 10-year-old boy standing in my yard with his feet bleeding. He asked me, polite as Sunday, could he please see his sister a little while before you missed him. He meant to walk back, Mr. Wright, before you missed him." Michael looked at the flannel on the small feet and said nothing, because there was nothing in him to say. Sadie woke, and there was crying enough to raise the roof. "I have held the both of them since sunup." Her voice stayed low for the children's sake and shook anyway. "The girl cries for him every night, every single night since the hall. I'd meant to write to the society, or to Providence, or to whoever answers for what was done in that hall. Now Providence rides into my yard on a bay horse, so I'll say it to your face instead." She stepped around where he must look at her. "You stood 10 feet from that platform, and you heard what I heard. 2 babies with nothing left on this earth but each other, and the county pulled them apart like a wishbone. You carried off your half, Mr. Wright, and called it hiring. What did you reckon would happen, Mr. Wright? That grief keeps to a placement paper? You split them. It's you he ran from, and her he near killed himself walking to. Come and see what you have done," I said. Well, you see it." Every word landed where she aimed it. Michael felt his neck heat and his back stiffen in the old way. No living soul had called him to account in 3 years, and he had forgotten how it was born. So he answered as he answered everything. He shut the door on it. The placement was the society's doing, not mine. His voice came out stiff as new harness. "I asked for a boy with a strong back, open and honest. That's the whole of what I asked. What fell out after was none of my working. A placement is a placement, ma'am. It's hard, I don't say otherwise, but hard is most of what this country deals in, and children must learn to bear what's dealt, same as the rest of us. Sooner learned, sooner mended. The room went quiet enough to hear the stove tick. He heard it himself then. That was the misery of it. He heard the words leave his mouth and ring on the floor like a counterfeit coin. Tinny, hollow, nothing like the truth. Children must learn to bear it. He had a rise behind his house with 2 crosses on it that proved what such bearing came to. He was looking at his own creed, said aloud at last to a stranger, and it sounded exactly as cheap as it was. Lily Keeney looked at him for a long moment. The anger in her face banked itself down into something worse. Disappointment. Sooner mended, she said. Yes, you look mended, Mr. Wright. It's spoken of all over the county, how well you mended. It went in like a knife, clean between the ribs, and the wound of it did not reach his face. He set his hat back on his head. I'll take the boy home now. He'll go hungry then. There's food not 5 minutes from ready, and he walked 10 miles for. He walked 10 miles because he was let think walking would cure something. It won't. The kindest thing either of us can do is not teach him different. Michael heard the hollow ring again, fainter, and pushed on past it. I'm obliged to you for the quilt and for the doctoring on his feet. It won't happen again. No, said Lily. And how will you fence it, I wonder? A boy with a reason. He had no answer for that either, so he bent and gathered Danny up. The boy half woke, feather-light, smelling of dust and lamp oil. His eyes opened a slit, found Michael's face above him, and did not startle at all. He had walked every step of the night, knowing exactly how it must end. Had to see was she all right, Danny murmured. Not sorry. A report given between men. She's all right. She ate. Something shifted in Michael's chest, heavy as a wagon going into sand. Sleep, he said roughly, and carried him out. Sadie woke as they reached the door. The small cry followed him, then the sound of the widow going to her, quick and low. He did not turn around. A man cannot look at everything. He rode home with the boy asleep against him, one arm around the thin body. The bay picked her own way east through hills gone bright and empty. The morning was fine. Larks sang all over it. He noticed none of it. For 3 years he had ridden this country feeling nothing. He had gotten good at it, had built it plank by plank out of work and silence. Now one small woman in one sod doorway had taken a quarter hour to put a splinter through the whole of it. Come and see what you have done, the girl's hand gripping her brother's jacket in her sleep, flannel on small, ruined feet. You look mended, Mr. Wright. The splinter sat where pride could not reach to pull it, and it worked deeper with every mile. Behind him, 10 miles back, Lily stood in her yard with Sadie on her hip, watching the horse grow small on the hills. She was still angry. She meant to stay angry, having no other tool to hand. But what stayed with her all that day was not the man's stiff creed. It was his face in that first moment by the table, hat in his hands, looking down at 2 sleeping children. She had seen granite crack once, in a freeze. It had looked like that. That man, she told Sadie, or Maud, or the wind, is going to be trouble to somebody. Away east, small and smaller, on the pale hills, the horse carried its double burden home. Neither household knew it yet, but the sandhills had a new road in them, walked open in one night by a pair of small feet. It would not close again. Chapter 5. 4 nights after the first crossing, the bunk was empty again. This time, Michael did not search the loft, nor the creek, nor the hog pen. He stood in the gray doorway with his jaw working, looking southwest at the hills. Then he saddled the bay without a word to anybody, there being nobody to say a word to. The tracks ran where he knew they would run. Small boots, night crisp, pointed like a compass needle. Halfway along, he passed 2 stones stacked one on the other, set neat beside the trail. His own place had been marked out like a road. The boy was building himself a map, one crossing at a time. At the Keeney soddy, the same picture waited. Danny asleep at the table, Sadie curled against him, the widow standing over the both of them with her arms folded like a hen over the wrong nest. Mr. Wright, she said. Mrs. Keeney. That morning they hardly argued at all. He drank the coffee she poured because refusing seemed worse, and then he carried the boy home. A pattern set in after that, the way weather sets in. Michael took to waking in the black hours to listen for the boy's breathing across the room. Some nights he heard it, deep and even, yet lay awake anyway. Other mornings the bunk stood empty, and the whole cold ride southwest he ran the same string of questions. Had it rained in the night? Had the boy taken his coat? What kind of man loses one child twice a week and calls his house in order? 6 nights later it happened again. That third time there was rain, a cold, slow rain out of the northwest. Michael rode with his heart in his mouth the whole way. He found Danny shivering by her stove, wrapped in the same quilt, his lips gone the color of skim milk. The boy had crossed 10 miles of soaked hills in the pitch dark, in weather a man would think twice about. Sadie sat pressed against him, patting his wet sleeve over and over, her small face gone old with worry. On the stove, the widow had milk heating. Nobody in that room looked at Michael as if he were the rescue. Lily met Michael in the yard before he was off the horse, and this time there was no coffee in her. "This has to end," she said. "On that we agree." Michael swung down, streaming. "He'll be watched closer. I'll bar the door if it comes to it." "Bar the door." Her voice could have struck sparks. "You'd pen a boy the way you pen a steer, and call the matter mended. He walked through that rain, Mr. Wright. Look at the sky and tell me what you'd have found if it had turned colder. Not this month, maybe, but there will come a wet night, or a hard frost, or one wrong step in the dark. Then you'll be tracking a thing that doesn't move." Michael said nothing. The same picture had ridden with him all the way over, and he had no argument against his own fear. "There is a cure," Lily said. "It is plain as daylight, and you know it as well as I do. Let them meet, openly, in daylight with our leave at a set time, give the boy a lawful road, and he'll quit making outlaw ones." "No." The word came out of him flat and fast before he had even weighed it. She looked at him the way she might look at a mule. "No," he said again, slower. "Meetings will feed the wound, not starve it. Every visit is one more parting, and every parting is the platform again. You saw what the platform did. Kindest course is to let the wound close." Close. Lily took one step nearer, rain and all. "Is that what wounds do out here when you keep tearing the bandage off to look?" "He wears a path in the dark to her door, and she stands at my south window every waking hour, watching for him. That wound is not closing, Mr. Wright. It is going bad. Any farm wife knows what you do with a wound going bad, and it isn't leave it be." Inside the house, as if called on, Sadie began to cry. Not the platform screaming, just a small, worn sound. The sound of a child watching her brother be carried off for the third time. Michael stood in the rain and hated everything about the morning. The truth was that softness frightened him worse than weather. He had shut every soft feeling away long ago. This woman was asking him to open up once a week on a set day. He knew what came of opening up. Warmth came first, and loss came after. A man who had buried his whole family knew that order by heart. But the boy was fading. That was the other truth, and it would not be put under. Michael saw it every day now across the supper table. Danny worked as hard as ever, was as mannerly as ever, ate less by the week. The shut face had gone from pale to gray. Whatever grief the boy was holding down, it was getting to be too much for him. 10 years old and burning himself up from the inside, one dark crossing at a time. And her sense was harder than his. That galled him, and there was no help for it. 3 times now he had come into this yard with the law on his side. 3 times he had ridden home feeling like the man in the wrong. She fought with plain facts, the way his wife once had. He had forgotten there were women who did that. He had made himself forget. "A trial, then," he heard himself say. "One meeting, we see what it does to them." "Every Sunday," Lily said. "Once a month is nearer reason." "Every Sunday, Mr. Wright, or I'll drive the girl to your gate myself on the Mondays, and you may explain to her face why she's turned away." They stood toe-to-toe in the rain and bargained hard, like 2 traders who did not trust each other. Neither would give an inch they did not charge for. He offered the first Sunday of the month and was laughed at. She proposed her own yard and got a flat stare for it. Once, she turned clean around, arms folded, and started for the house. He heard himself call terms after her like a man bidding at an auction he had sworn to stay away from. Sundays, then. Afternoon, when the morning work was done on both places. Not at either house, for neither would give the other that ground. at the creek that crossed halfway between the two claims, where a shelf of grass made a clean meeting ground with no walls. 2 hours by his watch. Each brought their own child, each carried their own child home. Rain canceled it, sickness canceled it. Harvest, when it came, would be discussed when it came. And the night walking stops, Michael said. That's my price. The boy gives his word, or there's no treaty. You'll have to ask him for it, Lily said. His word is the only thing he owns. They went in together, dripping, and put it to the children. Michael would remember the next minute a long time. He crouched to the boy's level, feeling foolish, and laid the terms out plain as a contract. Sundays, the creek. 2 hours every week with his sister in the open and above board. In exchange, no more night crossings. Danny's word on it. The boy looked at him through the whole speech without blinking. Then he looked at Sadie. Every Sunday, Danny said. Even winter, weather allowing, even winter. If the weather don't allow, the Sunday after counts double? Beside the stove, unexpected, Lily laughed. It changed her whole face, that laugh. Michael looked away from it quickly, as you look away from a bright window at night. Double, Michael agreed. You have my word on it. Now I'll have yours. Danny put out his small, chapped hand, grave as a deacon. Deal. They shook on it, man and boy, while the rain drummed the roof of the house made of dirt. Sadie did not understand the half of it, but she understood her brother's face. The crying stopped that minute, like weather clearing. Sadie made her own treaty besides. She fetched Mrs. Pig and offered the doll's cloth arm up to Michael, a solemn shake. Then she hid behind Lily's skirts to see what came of such boldness. What came of it was nearly a smile. Nearly. The corner of the man's mouth moved a quarter inch, as if it had almost remembered how to smile. The girl counted it a triumph and told Danny so twice. Riding home, the boy doubled behind him through the wet, shining hills. Michael told himself he had been out-generaled, plain and simple, flanked by a widow and a 10-year-old on his own ground in the space of a quarter hour. That was the story he assembled for himself, and there was comfort in it, the sour kind. It did not hold. What kept coming back instead, mile after mile, was the yard, the small woman standing in the rain with her chin up, giving no ground at all. Nobody had stood up to him like that in 3 years. Folks eased around him, spoke soft, let him be, the way you let a chained dog be. She had walked straight up to the chain and taken hold of it. You'd pen a boy the way you pen a steer, every Sunday, Mr. Wright. And then that laugh, coming out of nowhere, lighting the whole sod room like a second lamp. Something turned over in his chest, slow, deep, half seized with rust, like a pump handle working after years of dry. Michael sat up straighter in the saddle and put his eyes on the trail. It was relief, he decided. Relief that the night crossings were done, that the boy would come back to his food. Relief that he'd not spend another dawn reading small boot prints with his heart in his mouth. Any man would feel lighter. It was relief, with gratitude perhaps, the ordinary kind, and nothing that needed any other name. Behind him, Danny rode in silence for a mile or better. Then, to the wet hills as much as to the man, the boy spoke. She's all right, he said. The widow lady. Sadie sleeps better there than at the home even. She's all right. She is that, Michael said before he had thought at all. He heard it come out of his own mouth, plain as a bell. He set his jaw and rode on. At the last rise before home, he stopped the horse from old habit to look the place over. House, barn, windbreak, rise. For 3 years the site had been a ledger, so much standing, so much done. This evening, with a sleeping boy's head against his back, it looked strangely like something else. It looked like a place waiting for more people than it had. The hills went by, soaked and shining, dune after dune. Sunday was 6 days off. He caught himself counting them and told himself it was for the boy. Chapter 6. June came into the sandhills with a hot wind, and Lily Keeney's days turned into a war. It was not the kind of war with banners. It was the other kind, made of small losses and smaller victories, fought before sunup or after dark. Sod corn to tend on the flat below the house, a garden to carry water to, pail by pail when the rain held off. Hay to think about already, with one team, one mower badly in need of a smith, and one pair of hands. The well had gone worse over the spring. What came up now was brackish enough to pucker the mouth, fit for stock but hard on people. Twice a week she hauled sweet water in barrels from the creek, which cost half a morning each time. The windmill wanted new leathers. The corral wanted a post. Everything on the place wanted something, and all of it wanted her. Haying hung over the whole month like a debt coming due. 20 acres of bottom meadow, one woman, one balky mower. She lay awake planning it the way generals plan campaigns. Which fields first? Which mornings? What might be traded against the loan of a hired man for the stacking? There were no good answers. There was only the calendar, coming on. Then there were the cattle. She ran 11 head, which the county found comical, and that June a screwworm case turned up in a spring calf. Lily doctored it herself, alone in the pen, the calf fighting her and the smell enough to knock a man down. She got it done. Afterwards, she stood at the fence and shook for a while, where nobody could see. That was the trick of it, she had learned. You could shake all you liked, so long as nothing watched but the hills. Sadie, at least, no longer wilted the week long. The Sundays had done what all Lily's coaxing could not. The girl ate now. She had made peace with the hens, and something warmer than peace with Maud. The old cow's neck got stroked at milking now, as if Maud were a fine lady. Wednesdays she began asking how far off Sunday was. Fridays she asked twice. Saturdays she washed Mrs. Pig's face without being told, to have her decent for Danny. She still stood at the south window some evenings. But she stood there the way you watch a road somebody is coming back along, which is a different way entirely. And the girl had begun in her small way to pull in harness. She gathered the eggs now, all on her own, carrying the basket with both arms like church plate. She stood on a box to dry the dishes. Once, Lily found the kindling brought in unasked, stacked crooked but proud by the stove. She made such a wonder of it that Sadie glowed the whole evening. It was the middle of June when the land agent's buggy came up the draw. Lily saw the dust a mile off and knew it, the way you know a particular crow. She kept on hoeing until the buggy stood at her fence, because a man could wait the length of a row, whatever office he held. Mrs. Keeney. He climbed down, hat in hand, a stout, pink, tidy man with kind eyes and a killing patience. You're looking well. The place is looking well. The place is looking dry, and so am I. There's water inside if you can forgive the taste of it. He could. He sat at her table, admired the whitewash, spoke pleasantly of the weather to Sadie until Lily sent the girl out to the hens. Then he set down his cup, folded his soft hands, and got to it. I'll speak plain, ma'am, out of respect for you. Time was I thought you'd not last a winter out here. You've lasted 2, and I own I misjudged you. But you and I both know what's coming. You're carrying this claim alone, and there's the better part of a year yet before you can prove up. Now there's the child to feed besides. A lone woman cannot hold a claim like this one, Mrs. Keeney. It has been tried in this county. I have watched it tried. You're watching it now, Lily said. I am. He had the grace to smile. And I'm watching the well go bad, the mower sit broke, the hay come on with no crew to cut it. Yours is the best kept failing place in this county, Mrs. Keeney. Every fence tight, every hen fat, all of it held together by one pair of hands and main stubbornness. It does you credit, but credit is not a crop. Nothing in his voice was unkind, which made it worse than unkindness. I've a party who will pay for a relinquishment, a fair figure, more than fair. Enough to settle the store, then carry you east in comfort, you and the little one, with money over. You've the cousin in Ohio, I think, a woman with a good home behind her and a child to raise. Nobody living would call it quitting. Lily looked at her own hands around her cup, brown and cracked, with the hose shine worn into them. The figure he then named was more than fair. That was the cruelty of it. For one long breath she saw it entire, the way you see a whole country from a hilltop. Ohio, green and easy. A painted house with a cousin's charity in every room of it. Sweet water out of a dug well. Sadie in a starched pinafore at a school with a belle growing up soft-handed, and a train ride east with the sandhills falling away behind. A wooden cross painted white getting smaller on its rise until the grass closed over the site of it. No, she said, Mrs. Keeney, my husband is on that rise. She said it the way you state an account, no tremble in it at all. He broke this ground. He dug that well you're mourning over. We cut every sod in these walls together, he and I. He died before the land paid him back 1 cent of what it owed. The claim is the only thing left that his hands are still in. Quit the claim, and I quit him. I'll not do it, sir. Not for a fair figure nor a fond one." The agent looked at her a long moment, and something in his pink face was sorry, which she minded more than triumph. "Pride is a fine crop," he said gently, at the door, "but nobody's yet found the way to eat it come winter. I'll call again, Mrs. Keeney. I fear the day is coming when you'll be glad to see me." She watched his dust go back down the draw all the way out of sight before she picked up the hoe. Then she hoed to the end of the row, and the row after, hitting harder than the weeds required. Fair figure. Cousin's Charity, a good home behind her. As if any woman wanted her home behind her instead of around her. All around, the hills lay pale gold and silent, 10,000 witnesses with no opinion. The trouble with the agent was not his errand. The trouble was that his figures were her own figures. Another hand had worked the same sums and reached the same answer. That night, with Sadie long asleep, Lily sat at the table with the ledger open in the lamplight. She did so most nights now, though the book never once said anything new. The figures were the figures. The store account, owing since April. Seed money, spent. The mower's repair against the hay against the winter against the proving up. All of it stood stacked like a house of green wood, each stick leaning on the next. Let one stick fail, and it all came down. There was nothing anywhere in the columns for a bad month. There was surely nothing for a bad year. Around midnight, the wind got up. The windmill answered it. Clank, sigh, clank, sigh. She knew every sound the place could make, the way a mother knows coughs, the house breathing, Maud shifting in the barn, and under all of it, steady as a pulse, the question the county kept asking with its eyes each Sunday at church. "How long, Mrs. Keeney? How long?" Set against all that, one entry on the other side, one pair of hands. She rubbed her eyes and worked it through again, hunting the crack she might have missed. Somewhere there must be a figure that could be split or put off or done without. Pride, the agent had said. As if pride were what kept her. As if pride ever hauled a barrel of creek water or held down a sick calf. But in the low hours, with the lamp low and the wind at the eaves, she asked herself the question. The one the agent had been too gentle to ask straight. How long? Pride could stand watch a long time, but it could not pitch hay. Say the mower failed, say the well quit outright, or the winter came early, or her own strong back went wrong even a fortnight. What then, with a child in the house? What did the sums look like in January? How long could one stubborn woman keep standing in for two? And what, in the end, would be left standing of her? There was no answer in the ledger, none in the lamp, none in the coat hanging on its peg. For the first time since the funeral, Lily laid her head down on her arms, right on the open figures. She let the whole weight of it press on her, then bare small feet crossed the floor behind her. She had not heard the quilt stir. Sadie came padding around the table in her nightgown, trailing Mrs. Pig by one leg, half asleep still, hair every direction. She did not ask what was wrong. She only leaned in against Lily's side, the whole warm weight of her. Twice she patted Lily's arm, the very way Lily patted hers in the dark hours. "You can hold Mrs. Pig," Sadie said, "till morning." It was the greatest wealth the child had. She handed it over the way queens hand over kingdoms and stood there blinking, waiting to see the gift do its work. Something happened in Lily then that no ledger had a column for. It came up through her slow and hot, then hardened like cooling iron. Not pride. Pride was a poor cousin to it. She had stayed on this claim 2 years for a grave, for a memory, for the stubbornness of love owed backward to a dead man. All that held and would hold. But here was a warm, living child leaning on her arm, a reason that looked forward instead of back. It outweighed every figure in the book at one throw. Let the agent come again with his fair figure. Let the well go bad, the county laugh, the winter do its worst. This child had been torn from everything on earth once already. She would not lose her home a second time, not while Lily Keeney could stand upright between her and the debts. "Come on, little one," Lily said, and her voice was steady again. "Morning comes early." She tucked the girl in with the doll and stood a moment looking down at them both. Then she went back to the table and closed the ledger on the figures. She blew out the lamp, squared her shoulders in the dark, and made ready to endure another day. Chapter 7. From the door of Michael Wright's house, a man could not help but see the rise. That was the fact at the middle of everything, the fact the county never guessed at when it called him cold. The two crosses stood in plain view, a long stone's throw up the slope, framed in the doorway every morning when he went out. He had set them there himself, close by on purpose, in the first madness of that week. Some men would have buried their dead over the hill, out of sight. He had wanted them where he could stand between them and the weather. So there was no such thing, on that place, as an idle hour. An idle man would find himself looking at the graves. July bore down hard on both claims. Haying came on his ground in earnest, 40 acres and more. Michael mowed from dawn while the dew held the leaf, and the boy raked behind him. The stack rose in the yard, near as tall as a church. Hard, clean, endless work, the kind that lets a man drop into bed too spent for remembering. He had built his whole life on that plain trade. Michael worked the boy hard that summer, and himself harder, which was the only prayer he still knew how to say. Fence, hay ground, sod corn, stock, up before the sun, done after it. If the work ran out, he invented more, the way a drinking man invents errands past the saloon. Work was the only way he had left to carry his grief. He worked dawn to dark and never said a word about it. It took him most of June to notice what the boy was doing. The garden lay along the south wall of the house, or what had been the garden. 3 years of weeds had taken it, pigweed and bindweed shoulder high, a green ruin he passed 40 times a day with his eyes elsewhere. His wife had made that garden out of nothing. Hollyhocks against the boards, beans strung on twine, a crooked row of pie plants she was proud of past all sense. He had let the weeds have it deliberately, the way he had emptied the house. What a man cannot bear, he had better not look at. One evening in the wash of late light, he came around the corner and found the pie plants standing clear. A neat square yard of ruin had been weeded bare, down to clean dirt, the weeds stacked, wilting by the wall. The rhubarb stood in the middle of it, ragged, half-choked, alive. Somebody had carried water to it. The dirt still showed the dark rings. Michael stood very still for a long time. The pie plant. Of everything on the place, the pie plant. She used to talk to it, crooning over it like a third child, promising it pie tins it never lived to fill. He had heard her clear across the yard, laughing at herself, not stopping. 3 springs running he had kept his eyes off this corner, the way a man steers his mower around a snake hole. He knew whose work it was. There was only one other pair of hands on the place, and those hands were supposed to be resting after supper. He said nothing that night, nor the next. Each evening the clean square grew by a foot or two, quiet as moss. The boy who never asked for anything went on, never asking for anything. Then came the morning he saw Danny on the rise. Michael was at the barn door with the milk. The boy stood up there among the crosses, and Michael's first feeling was a black bolt of anger, that place being nobody's to stand in. The anger lasted 2 heartbeats. Then he saw what the boy was at. Danny took something from inside his shirt, bent and laid it at the foot of the small cross. The little one, his son's. Then he stood a moment with his head down, the way you stand when words are wanted but nobody taught you any. After that, he came down the hill to his chores as if nothing had happened at all. When the boy was well away, Michael climbed the rise. On the small grave, weighted with a pebble against the wind, lay a wild iris. Blue flag, fresh cut from the wet meadow along the creek, a mile's walk each way. Not the first either. Beside it lay 2 older ones, gone papery. He had never noticed them from the door he was so careful not to look out of. Michael stood among his dead with the wind moving the grass. What went through him had no name he knew. It was not anger. It cut worse than anger, in places 3 years of work had never reached. A strange child, carrying his own black grief, had looked at this house and seen what its owner would not see. The garden dying by the wall, the small grave bare. Every kindness the man had scoured out of the place, the boy was putting quietly back, one weed, one flower at a time. He asked no leave and told no one. Michael never spoke of it to the boy. He could not have. But something shifted in him that morning, the way frost ground shifts, deep under before any thaw shows. The change showed in small ways at first, clumsy and rusty, like a pump handle working after years of standing dry. At the wire one noon, with the boy's stretch holding true and tight the whole length of the line, Michael heard himself say, "Good work, as good as a man's." Danny looked up as if a rock had spoken. Neither of them knew where to put it, so they both looked at the fence. The moment passed. It was the best moment on that place in 3 years. Another evening, he put his hand on the boy's shoulder, passing, for no reason a witness could have named. Just set it there a second, the weight of it, and took it back. He did it the way a man does a thing he is practicing in secret, which was what it was. At supper, he began asking one question a night: what the teacher back east had been like, whether the boy had ever fished. Small doors opened a crack. Danny answered each one carefully, like a boy easing out on river ice, not yet sure it would hold him. The questions cost Michael more than the fence praise had. At the first one, the boy set down his fork and considered before answering. Cross, Danny said at last. The teacher had been cross, but fair. She kept a strap and hardly used it. Sadie could say her letters at 5 because of that teacher. He offered the fact shyly, sideways, the way he laid the irises. Michael received it with a nod, as if boys volunteered their sisters. Letters to him daily and passed the beans. The ice held them both. None of it was much. All of it was more than there had been. Even the house felt it. Nothing changed that a stranger could point to, no curtain, no picture. But the boy's boots stood by the stove now instead of under the bunk. On the windowsill sat a jar of creek pebbles, Sadie's gift on a Sunday, catching light. The room had quit echoing. A man noticed a thing like that and did not mention it. When he dusted, he moved the jar an inch, careful of it. Then Sunday came round again, the 7th or 8th under the treaty, and undid him entirely. The day was bright and hot, the creek running thin over its clean sand. The children met the way they always met now. Sadie flew the last 30 yards with her braids straight out behind her, and Danny caught the whole small weight of her without a stagger. Fierce and wordless, folding together, 2 halves of one whole set back to rights for 2 hours by his watch. Michael took his customary place, a little apart on the dry slope of grass. He had brought a currycomb that wanted mending, and he made a show of mending it. The show fooled nobody, least of all himself. Sunday had become the 1 hour of his week that asked no work of him. A man 3 years out of the habit of rest sat in it awkwardly, like company in his own good room. Custom put Lily Keeney under the willows with the food basket. He watched her and told himself it was only custom. She was teaching them to make boats that afternoon. Cottonwood bark hulls. A green leaf for a sail launched into the riffle with ceremonies of naming that got sillier by the boat. Sadie christened one for Maud the cow. Danny built his to last, keel-trued like fence work, and it rode the current clear down to the bend. The girl shrieked her joy. Lily laughed that laugh, head back, unguarded, bright as water. The sound of it crossed the creek and went into Michael like a splinter. His wife had laughed with her head back like that. It was the exact laugh he had scoured from his memory, because the memory could not be born. Here it stood, alive, in a patched dress, 30 feet away in the same sun. His whole chest opened along the old seam. The loss of that laugh, the loss of that warmth, 3 years of suppers eaten in a silence he had built and called peace. The bright day made it worse. Grief in the dark he knew how to carry. Grief in full sun, with children laughing on the water, was a wound torn fresh. It hurt the way thawing feet hurt, which is worse than the freezing ever did. He did not know what his face was doing. That was the whole trouble with a face 3 years out of use. Under the willows, Lily glanced up from the boats to see whether the man was minding the time, as he always minded it. She caught him unguarded instead. Michael Wright, the shut-faced, the fenced, the county's great example of stone, sitting apart on the grass watching her and the children with everything open. Hunger was the only word she had for what stood in his face. It was not the kind of look a woman needs to slap a man for. It was the hunger of a man outside a lit window in January, watching a warmth he had owned once and signed away. Naked, helpless, 3 winters deep, 1 heartbeat, and the shutters came down again. He was stone by the time he stood to call the hour. But Lily had seen it. All the way home behind the plodding team, with Sadie singing to Mrs. Pig beside her, she carried the sight the way you carry a lamp through wind. Careful, cupped, half afraid of it. All those weeks, she had been watching a man mind his watch. She had taken the stiff courtesy for coldness, the short answers for pride, the sitting apart for judgment on her doings. Now the whole account wanted adding again. What did it cost a man like that, coming every Sunday to sit at the edge of other people's gladness? And why, week upon week, did he keep on coming? She had had him summed and settled, the man who split the children, cold as a post hole in January. The sum was wrong. What lived out on that silent place 10 miles east was not a cold man. It was a starving one. Chapter 8. By high summer, both households lived for the same day, and that day came once a week. Sunday was the hinge everything swung on. The days had names again in Lily's house, but the names only measured how far off Sunday stood. Monday was the farthest away. Wednesday was halfway. By Friday, Sadie had begun her ritual questions. How many sleeps, how many chores, and on Saturday night, she washed Mrs. Pig's face and set her by the door, provisions ready, like a small traveler with her ticket bought. Lily teased her about it, gently, and got back a look of perfect 6-year-old scorn. He counts too, Sadie said. Danny counts everything. Saturday nights had a ceremony to them now. Bath, hair, prayers, with a new clause added to the prayers, unprompted, that God keep Danny and Mr. Wright and the horses. Lily kept her eyes shut through it and her face straight, which took doing. Mr. Wright and the horses, in that order, prayed for together, as if they belonged to one another. He did, at that. 10 miles east, though Lily could not see it, the boy notched his own week down in quiet ways. A man with sad gray eyes watched him do it over the supper plates, counting along in secret, telling himself he was not. The meetings themselves had worn into a shape, the way a good trail wears in. Most Sundays, the wagons came up to the halfway creek within a quarter hour of each other, from their opposite ends of the hills. Both children were out and running before the wheels stopped. That first minute never changed all summer, and Lily never learned to watch it dry-eyed. Sadie flying, braids straight out. Danny catching her, swinging her once around. The two of them folded together like two halves of one whole, fierce, wordless, complete. Meanwhile, the grown-ups looked anywhere else, fussing with harness that needed no fussing. Then the 2 hours went by, the way water goes through a broken dam. There was never half enough Sunday for everything the week had stored up. 2 hours, by his watch. But the hours had stretched somehow since June. Nobody had amended the treaty out loud. It amended itself, the way living things do. A quarter hour here, a quarter hour there. In time, the 2 hours were 3, and nobody owned to counting. Lily brought food for 4. That had begun the second Sunday, out of plain sense, since the children would not be parted long enough to eat separately. Fried chicken when a hen could be spared, cold biscuits with honey, a jar of pickles riding wrapped in a cloth. She spread the old blue quilt on the grass shelf above the water, and the 4 of them ate together in the willow shade. They passed the salt like any family, which none of them ever remarked on out loud. Michael, in his turn, had gruffly begun to bring what he could. The first offering was apples. He set the sack down on the quilt edge without one word of ceremony. Winter keepers from his cellar, wrinkled as old men, sweet as syrup. The children fell on them like locusts. After that, there was something most weeks. A twist of horehound candy from town, a whittled horse for Danny, mane and all, that must have cost the man 3 evenings by the lamp. When Lily mentioned her mower, he looked at the sky and allowed he might have the bolt it wanted. The Sunday after, the bolt was there, wrapped in sacking, price never spoken nor asked. The Sunday Mrs. Pig tore her arm half off was the one Lily thought about after. Sadie brought the wounded doll up the bank white-faced, holding the flap of calico shut like a farm wife holding an artery. A lesser man would have laughed. Michael Wright looked at the injury with entire gravity, went to his wagon, and came back threading a harness needle. "Hold her still," he told Sadie. "This won't hurt her but a minute." Lily watched those big weather-cracked hands work the needle through the calico, small, even stitches. He steadied the doll against his knee, gentle as a setting hen. Sadie leaned on his arm the whole operation, breathing on his hands, supervising. He bore it, more than bore it. Something in the man's face, bent over that doll in the willow shade, made Lily look away and busy herself with the basket. She felt she had read a page of somebody's letters. Mrs. Pig came through surgery with a seam good for 40 years. Sadie inspected the work, kissed the doll, then kissed the doctor on his jaw, quick as a bird stealing, and ran off down the bank. Michael sat for a moment like a man knocked still by surprise. "You've made a friend for life there," Lily said, for mercy, to give him a road back. "Cheap at the price of a needle," he said. His voice came out not quite level. Both pretended otherwise, and the afternoon went on. Sadie reported the verdict later, in the wagon, half asleep. Danny had told her Mr. Wright's hands could fix anything. Anything, she repeated, in case the wagon had missed it, and drifted off mid-list of the things those hands would be fixing hereafter. Between times, the children blazed. There was no other word Lily could find for it. Together, the pair of them burned bright as August grass. Danny taught his sister the creek, minnows, mud dams, which Willow made whistles. Sadie reported the entire week to him in one long, breathless stream of talk. Maud the hens, 4 new words she could spell. The boy listened to the whole of it every week, grave as a banker, nodding at the important parts. Their games had law to them, Lily noticed. Danny made rules the way other boys break them. Boundaries, turns, a fair start for the little one, as if making it all fair could keep his sister safe from the world. Sadie broke every rule with sovereign cheer. Her brother let her, every time, and called it umpiring. Apart, they dimmed. Even now, with the treaty holding, Lily could watch the light go down in Sadie through a Tuesday, like a lamp running dry. She could mark it rising again as the week turned home towards Sunday. Whatever the society's ledger said, the plain evidence sat in front of the two of them every week, sunburnt and shouting on the sandbar. Torn in half, the children were half children. Set together, they were whole. No argument Lily could have built said it better. She had the sense to quit building arguments and let the Sundays make her case. She could see it working on the man. Every week his watch came out of his pocket a little less often. Every week the wagons rolled apart a little later, with the shadows a little longer down the draw. And the wary treaty between the grown-ups warmed, week by week, into a thing that had no claws covering it. Over the blanket they had learned to talk. Weather and stock first, safe as church. Then the middling things, the mower, the well, the price of shelled corn, her hay. He gave advice like a man laying planks across a creek, one careful board at a time, testing his weight. She took what was sound and told him plainly when it wasn't. He relished being told, like salt after long, bland years. Then some Sundays, at the ragged edge of the talk, the buried ones came briefly up. Never head on. Sideways, in passing, in the space of a sentence. The pie plant is bearing, he might say, looking at the water. She set great store by that pie plant, and Lily would answer with something as small from her own rise that her husband could never mow a straight land either. Then they would sit quiet a minute, two people speaking carefully of each other's grief, going no closer than they were invited. Like decent neighbors, they nodded to each other's dead and let it be. Once, only once that summer, it went a step past the fence. He asked, looking at the water, how long before the nights got bearable. Lily gave the question the honesty it had cost him. They don't, she told him, but the suppers do in time, and the mornings. The nights come along last of all. He nodded, one slow nod, and fitted the fact away somewhere behind his walls. Neither said another word about it. The creek talked on for the both of them. No more than that. But every week, a plank or two farther out over the water. It was not courting. Lily would have bristled at the word that summer, had anybody in the county been reckless enough to say it to her face. It was two neighbors resting, one afternoon a week, from carrying weights no one else in 10 miles could rightly guess at. That was all it was. That was already more than either had planned on. The Sunday it went longest, the shadows had crossed the whole creek before either of them looked at the time. Below the riffle, the children had built a boat harbor, engineering of a high order, involving both engineers wet to the waist. Every crumb of the basket got eaten. Michael told about a hailstorm in his first year, hailstones big as goose eggs, the whole crop gone in a quarter hour. He told it, wonder of wonders, funny. Lily laughed until she had to wipe her eyes with her wrist. Then his watch came out at last, and the world with it. Wagons, harness, the parting. The children bore the partings better now. It was the price of the treaty, paid every week at dusk, and they had learned to pay it. Danny went gray and steady about it. Sadie's chin trembled, her hand wrapped hard in Lily's, a few tears going down the draw. By full dark, sleep. It was a world better than the platform. It was also, every single Sunday, a small tearing. All four of them knew which two people could end the tearings for good, and nobody said one word about that, ever. By August, the partings had their own ceremony. The children spun out the last minutes, one more throw of the stick, one more message each for the other's week. Tell Maud about the boats. Mind the mares off hoof. Then Danny would hand his sister up over the wheel himself, always himself. Afterward, he stood back with his jaw set in the old platform way, watching the wagon until it dropped behind the first hill. The teams pulled apart into the long light east and southwest. On her own wagon seat, with Sadie nodding against her arm, Lily was aware of a lightness in her chest, riding home. It alarmed her, that lightness. It had no business in a week with her hay coming and her well going. It felt the way Saturday feels when you are young. She was a widow of 29 on a hard-pressed claim. So she examined the feeling the way she would examine a strange track in the yard. It's for the children, she told the empty miles. The Sundays are for the children. The miles rolled by, pale gold, saying nothing. She could tell herself whatever she pleased out there. She still knew a lie when she heard one. Chapter 9. Long afterward, Lily could never say for certain which of the two children had commanded the campaign. She could guess, though. Sadie was the cavalry, all dash and noise. The planning was quieter work, and it looked like Danny's. It began, as far as she could ever trace it, with the wagon wheel. That was the Sunday in the middle of the summer when Michael's off-hind wheel came loose at the creek. He had the team hitched, the hour called, the partings half paid. Then Danny remarked in a voice as flat as ever that the wheel looked wrong to him. It was wrong. The nut had backed clean off the axle. Such a thing happens, though seldom to a man who checks his running gear the way other men check the weather. There was nothing for it but to block the wagon up and see to it. Seeing to it took the better part of 2 hours, counting the search through the grass for the nut. Sadie found it at last, of all people, a surprising long way from where it ought to have fallen. Nobody could drive home into dark hills on a bad wheel. Everybody had supper on the creek bank instead. The cold ends of the basket shared out 4 ways. The first stars came up while the children caught fireflies below the willows. Curious thing, Michael said, turning the nut in his fingers. Thread sound, nothing worn. Very curious, Lily agreed. Their eyes met over the hardware, then slid apart. Neither said what both of them were thinking. Once said, it would have to be answered. Besides, the mended wheel had bought the children an evening of fireflies. Anybody could see who had gained by it, and it was not the grown-ups. The pie came the following week. Sadie had helped bake it, a dried apple pie. At the parting, she carried it to Michael's wagon herself, with the air of a deacon presenting a Bible. Lily's best tin rode underneath it. That was the artful part, as Lily worked out later, being herded even as she reached for a plain plate instead. No, the tin, Sadie had insisted, near tears over crockery. It cuts truer in the tin. The girl had never cut a pie in her life. A pie may be given. A good pie tin must come home. It came home on the Wednesday at midday. Michael Wright sat his bay in her yard, holding the scrubbed tin like a man returning a hymnal. He allowed that he had been riding this direction anyway, after a stray. Nobody within 30 miles owned a stray that would take a man that far off his own grass, and both of them knew it. Lily thanked him gravely, all the same. Would he take a bite of dinner, since he had come so far? He took the dinner. On his way out, he mended the corral gate too, uninvited, while Sadie sat on the rail directing the work like a small crowned queen. Lily watched his dust go over the first hill with the strangest feeling working in her. It was made of amusement, suspicion, and something warmer she chose not to look at too closely. Then there was Tom Bergen. Old Tom freighted along the county road with his heavy wagon and his heavier opinions, A grizzled, bandy-legged bachelor, he had known Lily's husband, and he praised her stubbornness out loud. His route ran, as it happened, right between the two claims. Somewhere in those weeks he was recruited. Nobody ever admitted to recruiting him. But apples from the Wright cellar began arriving at the Keeney place in Bergen's wagon. A folded paper with Sadie's 4 spelling words rode east the same way. And Tom took to lingering at Lily's gate, praising Michael Wright to her in terms the man's own mother would have blushed at. "Steadiest hand in the county," Tom would say, apropos of nothing. "Gentle with stock, too. You can tell everything about a man by his stock. Well, I'll be getting on." He said the same at the other gate about her in the same innocent voice. Lily learned that later, and learned, too, that both children had a standing arrangement with him, messages carried free, no questions asked. Whether the children had hired Tom with pie or whether he had enlisted himself, she never established. Likely both. Matchmaking grows wild in a thin-settled county, and old bachelors take to it worst of all. The wildflowers she could not lay at Bergen's door. Those were Danny's own. They appeared on Sundays, laid on the wagon seat while she was busy at the blanket. Never handed over, never mentioned. Prairie roses at first, then blazing star as the summer turned, once a whole careful sheaf of black-eyed Susans bound up with a horsehair. The boy courted her the way he did everything, silently, thoroughly, leaving the evidence where she must sit on it or move it. She pressed 2 of everything in the back of her Bible and said nothing either. It seemed to be the way of this family. What was a woman to do with such a suitor? Scold him? He would only have taken the scolding as he took all correction, silently, swallowed deep where nobody could see it. Then he would have gone right on gathering roses. She let it be. It was the first courting Lily Keeney had received in better than 10 years, and the gentlest. It never asked her for one thing. Sadie's methods ran the other way entirely. The girl had taken to calling Michael by his front name. Nobody taught her it. She had simply gathered it up somewhere, the way children gather everything. One Sunday she skipped a stone flat past his boots and said, "Plain as morning, watch me, Michael." The whole creek bank went quiet. Lily opened her mouth to correct her. Something about the man's face closed it again. He looked, for one breath, the way a field looks when rain finally hits it. "Mr. Wright," Lily corrected anyway, gently for form's sake. "Michael will answer," said Michael Wright, and skipped the girl a stone of his own. From then on it was Michael, mended by nobody. Sadie sat by him at the eating now, supervised his hitching, brought him beetles of interest cupped in her hands. She had decided, with a 6-year-old's barefaced entirety, that this large, quiet man was hers to court. She courted him with beetles and confidences. He received both as if they might break in his hands. It would have been comic, all of it, if it had not been so easy to see what it was underneath. Lily saw. She saw 2 orphans working with the only tools in their box, a loose nut, a pie tin, a fistful of roses. They were building the one thing the county, the law, and the grown-ups had all told them could not be built. Torn apart once by strangers, they had set out to fasten themselves together for good, the only way left. Not run away this time, run toward. She knew she ought to stop it, or slow it, or at the least name it out loud. It was not honest, letting the children hope at what the grown-ups had no intention of supplying. Some evenings, she rehearsed the little speech, kind and level. They were good neighbors, Mr. Wright and she, no more. Good neighbors was already a great plenty. She never gave it. There was a corner of her, small and unexamined, that would sooner have burned the speech than give it. She knew that too. She chose not to look at that too closely either. 10 miles east, a large, quiet man was conducting the identical argument with himself at about the same rate, with about the same result. Michael knew a campaign when he was the object of one. The children had flattered him, fed him pie, and brought him beetles. He knew expert work when he saw it. Twice he had opened his mouth to tell the boy plainly that schemes were no use, that grown folks' affairs ran on other rails. Twice he had looked at that shut, hoping face and heard himself say something about the weather instead. The plain truth was that a part of him, long boarded over, liked the scheming. It liked being schemed about. It liked belonging to somebody's plan. So the 2 of them on their separate claims batted the plots gently aside, and gently failed to end them, all the golden last weeks. The evening it all came to a head was the evening of the watch. It was the closing of a long, sweet Sunday, the kind the children had learned to stretch. Wagons loaded, light going amber, and Michael went to his vest pocket for the hour, as he did by reflex a dozen times a day. The pocket was empty. A search commenced. The blanket was shaken, the bank walked, the basket unpacked clear to the crumbs. No watch. Michael grew quieter the way he did when it mattered, for the watch had been his father's. It was Lily who noticed at last the two children standing entirely too still at the water's edge. They wore the blandest faces ever worn by conspirators anywhere. "Danny," she said, "where has the watch got to?" A silence. Then Sadie, who could no more hold a secret than hold a trout, burst grandly into tears and produced the watch from Mrs. Pig's dress, quite safe, wrapped in a handkerchief. The logic came out with the tears. No watch, no hours. No hours, no parting. If nobody could tell when 2 hours had gone, the Sunday might simply never end. Nobody would ever have to hitch a team at all. Danny had reckoned Michael would blame himself for losing it. The plan had allowed for everything except Sadie's conscience, which held out about 4 minutes. There was a pause while the two grown-ups took this in, the engineering of it, the scale of the want behind it. Then Michael Wright began to laugh. Lily had never heard it before. Nobody in that county had heard it for 3 years. A big, rusty, disused laugh, half cough at the start. It got away from him entirely and bent him over the wagon box. It set Lily off. The laughing set Sadie off mid-sob, so that she hiccuped and wailed together. Danny, the field marshal, stood among his ruined works, grinning the first grin anybody had yet seen on him. For a minute the four of them stood by the water, laughing at one plot, like one family. Then the laughter ran out altogether, as laughter does, and nobody spoke. The silence that came down was not an empty one. It was full, and every person on that creek bank, down to the 6-year-old, felt what it was full of. 2 wagons stood pointed at 2 lonely claims in 2 different directions, and the question hung over all of them. Why? Michael put his father's watch away without looking at the time. Lily busied herself with the perfectly packed basket. The moment passed because neither of them would take it. But riding home in the last light, with Sadie asleep and the first cold star out, Lily finally said it to herself. In so many words, since nobody else was allowed to say it. The children were not building a foolish thing. They were building the only sensible thing in the county. It was the grown-ups who were the fools. Chapter 10. The rain quit in high summer, and the heat came down on the sandhills like a flatiron. 3 weeks without a drop. The grass cured early, standing dead and pale on 10,000 hills, whispering under the wind with a sound like paper sliding on paper. Lily hauled water and watched the sky. Everybody in that county was watching the sky. Grass country in a dry spell is a loaded gun, and every soul who lives on it knows exactly what it is loaded with. The storm came over on a Thursday afternoon, and it came dry. She heard it before she saw it, a mutter away in the northwest. In the garden, she stood with the hoe in her hand while the clouds walked in. High, hard-bottomed clouds, black as a stove lid, trailing no gray skirts of rain beneath them. Dry lightning stepped down out of them onto the hills, once, twice, prongs of white fire with no water behind them. "Sadie," Lily said, "level. Go in the house." The third strike came down 2 miles south behind the long ridge. For a while there was nothing. Lily stood watching the ridge with her heart going slow and hard, telling herself the strikes died out on bare sand as often as not. Then the smoke stood up. Thin at first, a gray feather bending on the wind. The wind was out of the south. She watched the feather thicken to a rope, the rope to a wall. The base of the wall went dirty orange. Her whole body went cold in the flatiron heat. 2 miles off, dead upwind, on a day with the grass cured to paper. The fire was coming to her. What she did next, she did without deciding, the way she had crossed the Grange Hall floor. Stalk out of the barn and corral, hazed east into the low wet ground by the creek bed where the grass stood green. Maud dragged bellowing on a rope. The team caught, hitched short to the wagon in the bare yard in case the worst came to running. Sacks, every sack on the place, and the 2 washtubs filled at the well, the windmill clanking over time while the sky went brown overhead. Sadie stood at the door, white-faced, clutching the doll. "Listen to me." Lily knelt, both hands on the small shoulders. She kept her voice flat and calm. "You stay in the yard, on the bare dirt, right by the wagon. The fire cannot eat dirt. Whatever you see, whatever I do, you do not leave the bare ground. Say it back." Sadie said it back. Her chin was going, but she said it back, every word. There was no question of going anywhere else. Some women would have taken the child up in the wagon and run north ahead of it. No jury in Nebraska would have blamed them. The thought never once arrived. Everything she had, everything 2 people had ever built or buried, lay on this ground in the fire's road. You do not leave your whole life to burn because staying is unreasonable. So Lily wet the first sacks and went to meet what was coming over the ridge. She could never afterwards set the next hour in order. It came back to her in pieces all her life. The smoke rolling down the slope ahead of the flames, low and boiling, day going to copper twilight, heat arriving before the fire did, a hand pressed on her from 100 yards out, and the sound which nobody had told her about, a tearing, breathing roar, like a train gotten loose of rails and driver both. The line of it came over the ridge a quarter-mile wide and walked down at her claim, eating as it came. She fought it at the plowed fireguard her husband had turned 3 years back, 4 furrows wide, half-healed over now with weeds. The weeds took, and she beat them out, sack in each hand, working down the guard in the blistering smoke. Where the flames jumped the furrows, she flogged the runners dead in the short grass. Her eyes streamed shut, her arms went to wood. Sparks flew off it the size of wrens, sailing high over the guard into the grass behind her. Scent. Each one had to be chased down and killed before it got its teeth in. It was too much line for one pair of arms. She knew it in her head before she felt it. The fire would flank her at the west end where the guard ran out. It would come round the shoulder of the hill and take the hay, the barn, the house, the whole 2 years of holding on. All of it stood behind one woman with a wet sack in each hand. Then, through the smoke, she heard a wagon coming, driven the way you drive when the load is everything. Michael had seen the smoke from his own high ground, 10 miles of it in one look. He read its baseline and the wind in the same second. He told her afterward that he did not remember hitching. What he remembered was the team stretched flat out on the county road. Beside him, the boy sat silent and white, hanging onto the seat rail with both hands. All the way over he ran sums, wind, distance, dry grass. The sums came out wrong, so he drove harder. He came off the road through her east fence, wire and all, because it was the shorter line. After that, there were 3 hands. He took the west end where the guard failed, the worst of it. Off his boot heel he set a backburn with the wind quartering. The strip of slow fire ate toward the big one, robbing the ground bare ahead of it. It was surgeon's work, minute by minute, a fire fought with a fire. Lily held the guard and killed the sparks. Danny, under orders, shouted over the roar, ran the water line between well and fight. Tub to sacks, sacks to hands, back again. Out of the smoke, the small gray figure appeared with dripping burlap, vanished, appeared again. The 2 grown-ups met in the middle of the line, worked outward, met again. Black to the eyes, the pair of them, coughing like consumptives. She could never say how long it lasted. It felt like no time at all, and it felt like years. And then, the way a beast dies, all at once, it was over. The big fire came up against the back-burned ground and found nothing there to eat. It fell in on itself, sulking down into smolders along a front 1/2 mile wide. The wind had done its worst for the day, and now it began to soften. Behind it, the south range lay black and smoking to the ridge. But the house stood, the barn stood, the hay stood. Over the whole reeking mess, the first stars came out, mild as lambs. Lily made it to the yard and ran her hands over Sadie, who had not moved 1 foot off the bare dirt. Then she sat down on the wagon tongue because her legs had resigned. Michael dropped beside her. There was nowhere else to fall. They were a sight, had anybody been left to see. 2 figures burned black as stumps, hair singed, eyes red as a ferret's. The shaking came in waves as the strength ran out and the fear ran in behind it, the way it always waits to. The children brought them water. They drank like field hands, passing the dipper, watching the smolders wink out one by one down the slope. Nobody spoke for a long while. There are hours that empty a person of everything but the plain fact of being alive. This was one. All four of them sat in it together while the burned land ticked, cooling in the dark. It was full dark when the words came loose. Afterward, Lily thought the dark was why. Some words can only be said in the dark. A week, Michael said. He said it to the burned hills. She had asked him nothing. From the first cough to the last shovelful, 7 days, start to finish. I've never told it to a living soul, and there it is. His voice came out low and rough, worn down to a rasp. She took the fever on a Monday washing day, laughing at herself for being tired. The boy started Wednesday. He went first, 4 years old, in my 2 hands. Beside him, the woman kept still, the stillness you keep for the dead. I was that certain she'd mend that I didn't tell her, straight off. She knew anyway. Mothers know. Then she quit fighting it. I dug both graves the same morning. The county sent food I fed to the hogs. After the burying, I scrubbed that house down to the boards. I have not said their names out loud in 3 years, because if I had said them, I could not have stood it. That's the whole of it. That's what's up on my rise. The smolders winked, red to ash, along the black slope. Lily gave him back the only answer such a telling will take. She told her own. 9 days, mine. Her voice was burned out, but it stayed level. The strongest man in this county, and it took him in 9 days at the end of a summer where we'd finally gotten ahead. He laughed at it the first day, same as your wife. Doctor never came. I closed his eyes at 4 in the morning with these 2 hands and milked at 6, because the cow doesn't care. 2 years I've been told to quit this claim by every kind soul in Nebraska. His sweat is in every rod of it. Up on that rise is the only piece of ground on this earth that will ever have him in it. So I stay. It isn't sense. Everybody tells me it isn't sense, and everybody's right. It's sense, Michael said. It's the only sense there is. The whole night stood still around that. There they sat, 2 people burned black, side by side on a wagon tongue. Each knew, for the first time, exactly what the other carried. All they had only touched sideways on Sundays was said plain, in the dark, and said to the one person built to carry the load. Something eased in Lily that had not eased since the funeral. She heard the breath go out of him, long, and knew the same easing for his. For 1 clean minute, neither of them was hiding anything at all. Sadie broke it mercifully by falling asleep against the wagon wheel with the dipper in her lap. Everybody moved at once, and in the moving, both of them saw plainly what that minute had been. They had told. Each had given the other the story they had never told a living soul. What they had done came home to the 2 of them in the same breath, and it frightened them witless. The goodbyes after that were a marvel of speed. Grateful, correct, half a sentence each about sacks and fences. He had his team turned before Lily had the children sorted. She was glad, and she hated being glad. His wagon went to the dark while her heart slammed like something newly caged. By morning, both of them had shut themselves away again, quick as scared animals. But a door once opened is never fully shut again. Both of them knew the way in now. Chapter 11. The fire made the 2 claims one story, and the county told it for 2 weeks straight. It was a good story, and it improved with handling, the way stories do. The widow on her fire guard, alone against the flames. Wright driving through his neighbor's fence, wire singing to fight at her shoulder. By the 3rd telling, the fire was a mile wide. By the 5th, he had carried her from the burning grass in his arms. He had not, as Lily said crisply to the one woman brave enough to repeat it to her face. But the story was only the wrapping. Inside it, every soul in that county was working the same sum, and everybody got the same answer. Lily heard the answer first at the store. She was at the counter over thread and coffee when the storekeeper's wife leaned in, all warmth and kindness. What a mercy it was, the woman said, Mr. Wright being so handy to her place these days. A small, careful pause followed. Of course, said the storekeeper's wife, sorting buttons, a fire's an ill way to get good help. There's them that manage it with a preacher, and 20 minutes. The thread, Lily said, and the coffee, thank you kindly. At church it needed no words at all. The Wright wagon and the Keeney wagon stood in the same yard now on preaching Sundays. The children could not have been kept apart with a crowbar. Michael sat his pew, Lily hers, decent as deacons. On the pair of them rested the entire congregation's attention, patient and knowing, like a cat at a mouse hole. After the service, the oldest of the church mothers took Lily's hand in both papery hands and held it too long. "Such a pretty family you all made, filing in," she said, sweet as clover honey. "I said so to my daughter. I said, now there is a wagon that only wants one team." Lily drove home from that service, with her spine very straight. It was not the meddling that stung. Meddling was the county's winter crop, and she had weathered plenty. What stung was how the words followed her clear to her own gate and would not leave. A wagon that only wants one team. She tried to pay them no mind. They stayed anyway. Michael got his at the blacksmith's, man fashion, with a horse between him and the words. "Here the widow Keeney's hay come in fine," the smith remarked, working the mare's hind shoe. "Here your boy is blood kin to her girl, and the two places lie 10 mile apart with a good creek halfway." A nail driven and clinched. Man could save considerable travel. "You want to mind the frog on that hoof," Michael said. That was the whole of his answer, all month, to everybody. Mind the frog. Fine weather. I'll take the harness leather too. But the words followed him home every time, and nothing would shake them loose. At night, in the silent house, the words came back to him, and that was the worst time of all. Tom Bergen alone said nothing, which from Tom was a speech. He only took to looking at Michael on his freight stops. He looked at him the way a man looks at a gate off its hinges, one that any fool could see how to fix. Michael loaded his goods and looked away. Because the arithmetic was sound, that was the misery of it. Nobody in the county could add it up wrong because there was no wrong way to add it. A widow woman on a good claim she could not hold alone, a widower on a big place gone hollow for want of a family in it, and a pair of orphans, blood kin, torn in half, each lodged with one of them, wilting apart, blazing together, plotting reunion with loose nuts, stolen watches. One wedding, 20 minutes of preacher, and every broken thing in the sum came whole at a stroke. 2 half households, 1 whole one. 2 failing places, 1 strong one. And 2 torn children made 1 family under 1 roof for good. Lily could do the sum standing at her window, looking east. She did it most evenings now, whether she chose to or not. Every time it came out even, and every time she turned from the window as if the thought had come too close. For there was 1 figure in the sum nobody else could count, and she kept it hidden in her own heart. She had been married for love. Whatever else her life had shorted her, it had paid her that once in full. A man had chosen her out of the whole world with nothing to gain by it but herself. He had done it over the plain objections of an uncle with a better match in mind. They had come west on nothing. Bride days in a tent, the 2 of them against the weather, laughing over burned bread. He had never in 9 years looked at her as a solution to anything. She had been to one man for 9 years, the point. And now the county proposed to marry her off the way you buy a windmill. For the water she'd raise. For the hands, the hay, the mended gates, the housekeeping, the mothering of a girl already half mothered. Wanted for her use. It was reasonable, thrifty, kind, and every time she thought of it, something in her rose straight up, ready to fight. She had been a wife once. She would not be a convenience, not for any man living, not even for a good one with sad gray eyes. To stand at an altar swapping herself for help with the proving up and call it by her husband's word, marriage. She would sooner lose the claim. That was Lily's figure. She kept it hid, and it ran her. Once that month, she took the old letters out of the trunk, the ones from their courting winter, read 2, and put them away again. Her husband's hand had been terrible, all fence posts and haste. Every crooked line of it had been written to Lily Keeney because he could not help himself. That was real love. She had held it once, and she knew it by sight. Nobody was going to hand her a counterfeit. 10 miles east, Michael kept a different figure, hid deeper, that ran him harder. His was not pride. Had telling been a thing he did, he would have told you the county's sum left 1 man out. The man left out was Michael himself, and he counted for more than all the rest. He knew what he was now, a man self-made, plank by plank on purpose. A man scoured down to work and weather, fit company for stock. That woman across the hills was alive the whole way through, quick, warm, stubborn, bright as water. She had buried a man she loved outright, and loving was what she was made for. What could a shut house offer her but the view of its walls? Say she took him, out of sense, out of need, for the children. He would watch her dimming across his table year by year, like a lamp shut away in a cellar. He would know he had done it. That would kill him deader than the fever had managed. And under that figure lay the last one, the one he never took out at all, which the fire had pried at. He had held everything once. It had taken the world exactly 1 week to relieve him of all of it. Since then he had gone along quiet, owning nothing that could die on him but stock and fence. What the county was proposing, in its kindly arithmetic, was that he go back to the table and put down everything again. Wife, children, a whole house full of people the next fever could take from him. He had watched the fire come at her claim across 10 miles, doing sums the whole way over. Every sum had come out at the same place. If it takes them two, you will not stand it twice. So he mended fence that did not want mending, greased axles bright, and kept his eyes off the southwest at evening, mostly. The work went fine. Everything on the place went fine. A man can starve to death with his barn full, his stock slick, every fence singing tight, and the county will call him prospering. A man could not say that aloud. So he said, "Mind the frog," and drove home. The word rode with him. The word was at the creek too now. That was the strangest part. It sat with the four of them on the blue quilt like a fifth plate nobody would fill. Sundays had gone on since the fire, but they had gone on careful, and the children knew it long before the grown-ups guessed they knew. Something had happened in the smoke. Some door had opened. Then some cold morning-after wind had shut it. Now Michael and Lily spoke to each other like two people carrying full pails, level, slow, watching their feet. No more talk at the ragged edges, no more planks out over the water. The watch came out of the pocket on the hour. Danny read it the way he read everything, silently, twice. "They had a fight," Sadie offered, under the willows from her vast experience. "No," Danny said. "Worse, they got polite." Sadie considered this. In her experience, polite was what you got before medicine or before goodbyes. She moved closer to her brother on the bank and took hold of his sleeve. The two of them watched the grown-ups being careful of each other across 30 feet of grass, the way you watch weather building. Nothing built that Sunday. Nothing broke either. The four of them ate on the same quilt in the same willow shade, a careful foot farther apart than August. Between all of it ran the creek, the one honest speaker on the bank. He lay back on the bank, looked at the sky, and did his own arithmetic. It was the same as the county's, only paid for differently. The county risked nothing on the sum. Danny had everything in it. Every Sunday the light went long, the wagons parted, his sister cried going south, he rode dumb going east. And the one word that would end it sat in plain sight in the middle of the county. Everybody knew it. Nobody ever said it. Grown folks, the boy concluded, were a study. He had studied them all summer, the way he studied weather and wire. What they wanted was plain as a smoke column on the horizon. What they did about it was nothing. Each did nothing in a different way, week after week. He was 10 years old. Behind him lay dark hills crossed alone at night, 2 parents buried, a sister's whole world kept safe in his pocket for a year. Now he considered the 2 people on that creek bank, each starving for what the other one had a barn full of. Each too gallant or too scared to say the word the storekeeper's wife could say over buttons. Even at the edge of a good summer, a boy can despair a little. Danny lay in the grass with the sky going tall and cold above him, feeling it. The word would not say itself. That much he had proved by waiting, and the summer was over. Chapter 12. The idea came to Michael in the barn, the way his worst ideas always came, looking exactly like his best ones. He was oiling harness at the time, with a first cool rain out of the northwest on the roof. The idea arrived whole, and it was a trap of his own making, though he could not see it. He stood still with the rag in his hand for a long while. Then he said aloud to the bay mare, "It's sense." The mare made no answer, which he took for agreement. It was this. The county's arithmetic was sound, and everybody knew it. All that stood between four people and their plain good was the dangerous part, the wanting. Very well. Take the wanting out. Offer the woman the sum without the sentiment. A marriage laid out square, like a contract for hay. The children reunited under one roof. Her claim joined to his, worked with his teams, her proving up made certain. A partnership, everything above board, each party keeping their own room and their own griefs, nothing asked that a housekeeper would not give. That way she could accept without pretending to love him, which she could not be expected to do. That way he could have her in his house, at his table, in his fields. His heart would stay locked away where nothing could take it. Everything gained, nothing risked. He worked it over for 6 days, the way he worked over a land deal, and could not find the flaw in it. He even caught himself listing what she would gain by it, item over item, like a man writing a bill of sale. Security, the girl, her brother with her. The claim proved up, the agent sent packing for good. Never once, in 6 days of figuring, did it occur to him to list what he wanted. That was the whole trick of the plan. There was a flaw in it. The mayor could have told him. He wanted warmth in his house. His plan kept the fire out in the yard where it could never warm him. But Michael had been 3 years shut away from his own heart, and he could not see the flaw. So he polished his plan, rehearsed the words at his own gate, and rode to the last Sunday of August. The whole speech went with him, folded up like a warrant. The day never suited it. That was the first wrongness, if he had been reading signs. It was a high blue day, warm in the sun, the cottonwoods just turning at their tips along the creek. Now and then, a first leaf came down onto the water. The children raced boats. Sadie had brought him a beetle of particular quality. The whole afternoon sat there being what the summer had been, asking nothing. Twice Michael put the speech off, feeling it sour in his pocket like milk carried too far. He got it out at last, near the parting hour, when Lily was folding the blue quilt. He helped her fold it, corner to corner, which brought them close. His own voice, when it came, went flat and careful, the voice he bought cattle with. "Mrs. Keeney, there's a matter wants raising. I'd have you hear it all before you answer." She straightened with the quilt over her arm. Something in her face went very still, and a wiser man would have stopped there. "I've been at the figures," Michael said. "Yours and mine both. 2 places 10 miles apart, worked against each other, when they'd carry all 4 of us worked as one. You'll not prove up alone, whatever your grit, and my house stands empty as a church Monday. The children are blood, and every soul in this county knows where they belong, which is together." He drew breath. The last of it he laid down like coin. "So I'd propose a plain arrangement. A marriage in name, before the law, for the children's sake and the land's. You'd keep your own room and your own ways. I'd ask nothing of you a partner wouldn't ask. It's a business understanding, fair dealt, no more. You'd be secure. The girl would be settled. The boy would quit grieving. It's sense, every line of it. I'd have you consider it." The creek went on running. A leaf came down onto the folded quilt between her 2 hands, and Lily looked at it. Michael watched all the color leave her face the way water leaves sand. He had rehearsed every part but this. "A business understanding," she said. "Fair dealt," he said into the cooling air. "Nothing that would... I'd not be a husband to trouble you. It would be for them and for the 2 claims. You'd want for nothing. For nothing." Lily laid the quilt in the basket with great care, as if it were what stood in danger. When she came up, her voice was quiet and it had frost right through it. "There it is at last. The county's been saying it all month over its buttons, and I did you the honor of believing you were not the county. A windmill, Mr. Wright. You are pricing a windmill. It pumps, it mothers, it keeps a house, it signs where the paper wants signing, and it asks nothing, being a windmill. You'd even let it keep its own room, which is generous for machinery." "That is not what I... It is exactly what you said." She did not raise her voice at all, which was worse than any shout. "I'll tell you what I buried, since you've told me what you'd buy. I was 9 years married to a man who wanted me. Me, mind. Not my hands, not my hens, not what I'd save him in hired help. If I brought him nothing on this earth but myself walking through the door, he counted the day paid. That is what marriage is. I have had it, and I know the difference in the dark, the way anybody who has held real gold knows the fake." Her chin came up. Her eyes were bright and terrible. "I told the land agent no for a fair figure. I'll tell you the same, and you may take it back east with your arithmetic. I was a wife once, Mr. Wright. I'll be no man's economy." The words went into him exactly where his own had gone into her. Being frightened, he answered from behind the wall, the worst place a man can answer from. "Then you'd let 2 children tear every Sunday of their lives," he said, stiff and cold. "All for a feeling you'd sooner bury with a dead man than spend on the living. There's a name for that economy too, ma'am." The silence after that was the kind that cannot be repaired in the hour it is made, perhaps not in the season. "Hitch your team, Mr. Wright," Lily said. "You'll want the light." The children were called up from the water. They came, stopped, and read the bank the way animals read burnt ground. Neither child said one word. Sadie looked from face to face with her lip going. Danny looked only at Michael, one long level look, and then took his sister's hand. At the wagons, Sadie broke. Not the platform screaming, only the small rain sound, going down the draw in the other wagon, her face turned back the whole way. The last he saw of that Sunday was his sister crying south across the hills, and no grown-up doing one thing about it. Danny rode east with his hands in fists. The partings that evening were done with terrible courtesy. The wagons went into the dusk in their 2 directions, east and southwest, wider apart with every turning wheel. There was no meeting the Sunday after. Word went by Tom Bergen, stiff as a legal notice, that the hay wanted hauling on the right place. The Sunday after that, rain served for the excuse, though it cleared by noon. No third excuse arrived. None was asked. The treaty was not broken, exactly. The grown-ups just let it die quietly. Tom Bergen's wagon still rolled between the places, twice a week on its lawful business. The freight of spelling words and pressed flowers had stopped moving, though. Even the children's post had gone quiet, each small correspondent waiting on the far side of a quarrel neither had made. At the Keeney place, the south window had its watcher again. Sadie did not cry the first week, which was worse than crying. She stood at the glass in the evenings with Mrs. Pig hanging from one fist, watching the road that nobody came down, and asked her questions to the window. Was Danny sick? Was it the rain? Had she done a wrong thing that the Sundays stopped? On the 8th day, the crying came back, the small rain sound in the dark that Lily had thought done with forever. She rocked the girl, gray-faced, in the creaking chair, hating one stiff-necked man and herself in even portions till morning. The questions were the hardest part. Lily answered what could be answered. Danny was not sick. Nobody was cross with Sadie. The Sundays were only resting a while, the way fields rest. The girl took the answers politely, the way she had once taken paper dolls, and went back to the window. Children always know when a promise around them has died. 10 miles east, the house had gone silent again, too. The boy did his work, ate what was set out, answered what was asked. It was all exactly as it had been in the first week. Only now the man knew precisely what the silence was made of, having lived otherwise all summer. They met by accident at the mercantile, the man and the boy on one errand in the second week of it. Michael was at the counter. Old Tom Bergen stood by the stove with 2 other men, talking freight. The talk came around, the way all talk in that county came around, to the widow Keeney. Bergen's voice dropped to the register men keep for bad news. Word was, said Tom, the agent had been out to her place again. Paper trouble this time, real trouble, a lien coming due off her dead husband's debts. Word was the widow might be done by spring, sold up, gone east to the cousin dealt, her and the little girl with her. And a shame it was, said Tom, a shame on the whole county, her deserving better of the country than it ever gave her. Ohio, somebody said. That's a distance. Michael paid for his nails and drove home with his jaw set. The talk of stores was half wind, he told himself, knowing better. All 10 miles he built wall against what he would not feel. But Danny stood by the stove, forgotten the whole time, and Danny heard every word. Ohio, a lien, sold up by spring, Sadie going east. The boy said nothing all the way home, sitting the wagon seat like a carved figure. But that night in his bunk, with the man breathing slow across the dark room, Danny Flynn lay awake. 2 things lay awake with him. His sister's face going down the draw, and the word Ohio. He did his last figuring of that whole long summer. It came out short and it came out cold. The grown-ups had been left to fix it. The grown-ups had broken it worse. Very well. He had given his word about the night walking, and he would keep it, the letter of it. He had never promised one thing about the day. Whatever was coming, he would not be standing on a platform twice. Chapter 13. The land agent came up the draw again in the first days of September, and this time he did not smile at the whitewash. Lily knew it for bad before he was down from the buggy. A man's errand shows in his shoulders. She set down the axe at the woodpile, wiped her hands, and met it standing. Mrs. Keeney. He had a paper with him. Men like him always had a paper, but he held this one the way you hold hot iron. I'd sooner have ridden anywhere else in this county today. I want you to know that before I say the rest. She took him in, gave him coffee, sat him at the table where he had once praised her fences. Then she made him say it plain, all of it, twice. It was a lien. Her husband's name was on it, from the second year, the bad one, when seed had to be bought on paper or not at all. He had signed against the claim's improvements, meaning to clear it off the next crop. Then came the fever. In the estate's tangle afterward, the debt had been sold, then sold again. It went to Omaha men who snapped up such paper the way owls snap up mice. Now it had come due. There was a figure, and there was a date in the new year. The figure might as well have been the moon. "You fought this place to a standstill, ma'am," the agent said, and his pink face was honestly wretched. Nobody thought to see it, least of all me, but grit pays no lien. If it's not cleared by the date, they'll take judgment. The relinquishment money would cover it, with enough over to set you and the child down easy in Ohio. It is the last good door out of this, Mrs. Keeney. I'd be your friend, and I tell you the day is coming when it shuts. Lily sat very still, both hands around her cup, and for once in her life had no answer at all. Because the numbers had won at last. That was the plain of it. Not the well, not the hay, not the county's patient certainty. A page of paper with a dead man's brave scrawl on it, sold twice to strangers, had done what 2 winters could not. She could hold a claim against weather, loneliness, and all the kindly meddling in Nebraska. Nobody could hold ground against a figure with a date under it. "I'll not sign today," she said at last, which was not an answer, and both of them knew it. The agent gathered his hat. At the door he paused and did not look at her. "There's some in this county," he said, careful as a man crossing ice, "who'd count it an honor to stand between you and this paper. You've only to let it be known." "Good day to you, sir," said Lily Keeney. He sighed and went. That evening she did not open the ledger. There was no arithmetic left to do in it. She sat instead with Sadie's copybook, hearing the girl spell her way through winter, window, and Wednesday. Around her stood the lamplit room her husband's hands had built, one sod at a time. Board by board, rope by rope, 2 years she had held it. Paper was going to take it anyway. When the child slept, Lily stood a long time at the south window, looking at nothing. Behind her on the shelf lay the lean paper, like a live coal. The word ran the county inside a week, the way water runs downhill. "Done," said the word, the widow's claim. Gone by spring, east to a cousin, her and the little girl both. Tom Bergen carried the word to the right place without being asked, and set it down in the yard like freight. Then he stood there, while Michael went on greasing an axle that shone already. "Ohio," Tom said. "For them that don't know, that's better than 500 miles. I know where Ohio is." Never doubted it. Tom climbed back to his seat and gathered the lines. He looked down at the man below him for a long moment, and for once the old freighter's voice had no twinkle anywhere in it. "I'll tell you what I hauled once, Wright. I hauled lumber for a man's house 1 month, and his coffin boards the next. One word said in time would have spared him both hauls. Get up there, mules." The wagon rolled. Michael greased his axle. In the house that evening the clock ticked, and the man never seemed to hear it. The boy across the table watched him. To Danny, the news came down like winter. It was not talk, it was miles, 500 miles. He worked at the figure that night in his bunk, the only way he knew, plain sums in the dark. 10 miles he had walked, and it had nearly finished him once in the rain. 10 miles was a night's hard walking with the stars right. 500 miles was 50 nights, through country he did not know, past towns full of grown folks with questions, in boots already too small. It was no distance a boy could cross. That was what it was for. He understood that with a clarity that made him feel very old. This time the world had put real miles between them, so the tearing would hold. He thought about the man's money, which existed. He thought about the woman's pride, which was granite. Then he thought about spring, which was coming on a schedule, the way trains come. Grown folks talked about time as if there were always more of it coming. Danny had stood on platforms. He knew exactly how long time was. Time was the minute the whistle blew, and then it was gone, unless somebody stopped it before the miles began. So Danny Flynn, who never wasted words, spent that week using every one he had. He tried the man first at the supper table, straight out, because crooked ways cost time. Mrs. Keeney was in trouble with a paper. The man had money, or credit, which was money that trusted you, a loan between neighbors. He'd work off any part of it himself, 5 years if wanted. It could be written down formally. Michael heard him out with his fork stopped. Something moved in his face, and for one breath the boy thought he had won. "It's not my affair," Michael said. The old words, level as a wall. "Nor yours. A man doesn't put money at a woman uninvited, boy. She'd send it back and she'd be right to. There's things between grown folks you can't see the size of. Eat your supper." "I can see the size of 500 miles, Danny said. "Eat your supper." The boy ate his supper. Every bite of it, neatly, plate scraped clean. He never raised the matter again, which the man took for the end of it. It was not the end of it. It was only the end of asking. He tried her next, riding along on Bergen's Thursday freight, lawful as church. His promise had been about night walking, and it said nothing about wagons. Lily met him at the gate with a gladness that hurt to look at, and Sadie hung on him like ivy. For an hour it was nearly summer again. Then at the going he stood square in front of Lily and tried his last coin. "He'd help," Danny said, "if you sent one word. He's wanting to. It's all over him like a brand, ma'am. One word." Lily's face did what the man's face had done. It moved, then shut. Her hand came to rest on his head, gentle as anything. "Some doors only open from the inside, Danny," she said. "I can't ask a man for what he had the chance to give and offered me the price of instead. You'll understand it when you're grown." "No, ma'am," said Danny, level. "I don't expect I will." That was as far as pleading carried, either direction. Two proud faces, closed the same way, 10 miles apart. Each tended their own hurt and kept it burning, while the date on the paper came closer every day. The plan came to him whole that night, the way plans came to him, quiet and finished, as if it had been waiting. He turned it every way in the dark. It was a bad plan. He was 10, not a fool, and he knew it was a bad plan. But he set it against the other plan. In that one, he stood on a platform come spring, while a train took Sadie east over the curve of the world. Every plan was bad now. His was only the least bad. Somewhere the world had a place in it, a town, a farm, a somewhere. A place that would take a boy who worked like a man and a girl who was no trouble, no questions asked, the two of them together, for keeps. The orphan train had proved such places existed. It was only ever the choosing that had gone wrong. This time he would do the choosing. The stolen meeting was managed the next Thursday, in the willows behind Lily's garden. It lasted the 10 minutes while Tom Bergen drank coffee at the door, praising the weather in a voice that carried. Danny laid it out for his sister short and in order, as was his way. The paper, the date, Ohio, and what 500 miles meant, drawn in the dirt with a stick, her whole small face following the line of it. Then the plan, a night with a moon, the creek, and where to meet him on it. The willow snag where it bent nearest her place, an easy mile, all downhill, wait for his whistle. Bread, boots, Mrs. Pig if she must, but wrapped dry. Sadie looked at the line in the dirt for a long time. "Will it hurt?" she asked. Not the walking. He knew what she was asking. Leaving the warm soddy the lamp, the arms that rocked her, leaving the second mother, for a second time, in the dark, without a word. "It hurts worse to be took apart," Danny said. "You know it does. We're all that's left of us, Sadie. Nobody tears us in two again. Not ever. Say it." "Nobody tears us in two again," Sadie said. "Not ever." Her voice wobbled in the middle and set hard at the end, just the way her brother's did. He spat on his palm, solemn, and she spat on hers. The promise was sworn the old way between the last two Flynns on earth. From the house, Lily's voice called that the wagon was leaving. Danny scuffed the map out of the dirt with his boot. They walked back into the open, wearing the blandest faces ever worn by conspirators anywhere. Nobody remarked on anything. Grown folks saw what they watched for, and just now the grown folks were watching their own hurts. All that remained was the weather. A night with a moon, he had said. That very week, the sky began building a storm instead. Chapter 14. The day came in wrong from the start, close and still, with a light on the hills like green glass. Summer had one storm left in it, and the whole country felt it coming. Lily felt it in the well rope, in the flat way sound carried. Not a leaf turned on the windbreak. The hens sat early. Away in the southwest, all afternoon, thunder muttered, quit, muttered again, like a man talking himself into something. The air lay on the skin, thick as wool. All day, Lily did her chores under that green light with one eye on the sky. There was still a haystack to wait, hens to shut in early, the team to bring up close. Weather always sent warning ahead of itself in the sandhills, and Lily had learned to heed it. What she could not know was how much else was moving that day, silent and hidden, behind two children's faces 10 miles apart. Weather coming, she told Sadie at supper. A big one, by the feel. Sadie was quiet that evening. Quiet and strange with it. She ate all her supper without being told, which had never once happened in the history of that table. She dried the dishes on her box and put Mrs. Pig's things in order on the windowsill. Then, at bedtime, she wrapped both arms around Lily's neck and held on a long, long moment, tight as wire. "You're a good one," the girl said into her collar. "You're the best one there is after Danny." "Well now," Lily laughed, holding her. "What's bought me such a testimony?" "Nothing," said Sadie, muffled, "just so you'd know it." Long after, Lily would take that hour out to hold it to the light, over and over. The signs had all been there, laid out plain as a map, a child squaring her small accounts. She had seen everything while watching for nothing, being busy with a paper, a date, and her own locked heart. She banked the stove, checked the sky once, and put the lamp out. Sleep was slow coming with the air so thick. She lay listening to the first wind finger the eaves, running the day's worries in their usual order. The paper, the date, the stiff-necked man 10 miles east. Not once did the list include the right one. The right one lay 2 feet away, breathing soft, with her boots already chosen. The moon never rose that night. It was up there somewhere, full as promised, but the southwest had been building all day, and by dark the clouds had eaten it whole. Danny lay in his bunk in the far house, dressed under the blanket, and did his sums one last time. The word he had given did not stop him. He had gone over that ground until it was worn bare. His word had been one clause in a treaty, given for Sundays, and the grown-ups had let the treaty starve dead in front of everybody. A promise made inside a bargain died with the bargain. Maybe that was crooked reckoning. He allowed it might be. But there was no honest road left on the map at all. A boy on a bad plan could not afford a dead promise on his back besides, 500 miles being what they were. Across the room, the man breathed slow and even, worn out with hay hauling. For a minute, one weak minute, the boy lay listening to that breathing and nearly did not go. The room was warm. On the sill sat the jar of creek pebbles. The man had laughed once by a wagon, had stitched a doll, had said as good as a man's at the wire. Something had been building in that scoured house all summer, plank by plank, that felt very near to what he was leaving to go find. Near was not the same. Near could be voted away by grown folks any Sunday they chose. He had seen it done. Danny rose without one sound, took up his boots, and went out into the dark, closing the door soft on the breathing man. The first mile he walked, listening hard, waiting for the door, the voice, the lamp. None came. The second mile the country took him in, the old way, sand underfoot, grass hissing soft, the dark hills breathing around him like penned stock. Any other night it would have been almost sweet. This night he kept his eyes southwest, where the sky flickered and lengthened his stride. He was to the creek a little past the night's middle, moving easy on ground he had walked before in the dark. At the willow snag where the water bent, He whistled once, low, a bobwhite gone slightly wrong. Out of the dark under the bank came a small shape, a flour sack over its shoulder, a doll's head riding out of its collar. "You came," Sadie whispered, as if her brother's word might not be kept. "I always come. Give me the sack." She had done it all right, every instruction. Boots, bread, dry-wrapped doll, out the window after the lamp died, down along the creek counting bends. She was 6 years old, shaking with the size of her own boldness, proud enough to burst. He checked her boots by feel, retied one, and put his coat on her over her own. Then brother and sister stood on the dark bank, hand in hand, at the edge of the biggest deed they had ever dared. "Which way is it?" Sadie whispered. "The place." Danny looked west, where the railway lay, somewhere, over some number of hills under a black sky with the moon lost behind the storm. "Follow the creek to the crossing first," he said. "Then west. We walk nights, sleep days. When we hit the railroad, we follow it to a town where nobody knows our faces. Then we pick. You hear me, Sadie? This time we do the picking." Sadie took his hand, satisfied entire. The plan had holes a grown mind could have driven freight through. Towns, winters, wages, the law. She was 6. Her brother had said it, so it was so. That was the whole of her map, and it had never yet failed her. The first thunder that meant business rolled down the hills like a wagon crossing a bridge. They went, hand in hand, into the dark. 2 small figures with a sack of bread and a child's whole bright certainty, out into 10,000 hills. Behind them, lightning lit the whole southwest white from horizon to horizon. The storm was coming on. Lily woke past midnight with the wind arrived and the window light going white, dark white. She could not have said what sent her across the room to the quilt nest by the stove. Some silence under the wind, some mother noise missing from the house. She put her hand down onto blankets shaped like a sleeping child. The blankets folded flat and the whole world stopped. Sadie. The lamp. Every corner. The curtain, the barn, the yard gone wild with wind. Nothing. And then back inside, on the table, held down under the honey jar where it could not miss her eye, the paper. Sadie's 4 spelling words had grown over the summer to a dozen. The letters marched huge and crooked, worked in pencil, with the tongue-bitten labor of 6 years old. They said what they said. "Gone with Danny. Don't cry. I love you." Lily's blood turned to water. She stood there one whole breath in her nightgown in the jumping light. Every piece of it fell into place with a sound she could nearly hear. The quiet supper, the long, fierce hold at bedtime. So you'd know it. The children had watched the grown-ups walk around the word all season and had despaired. They had gone to solve it the only way left to the small. They were out there now, out in that. The window went white again, and the thunder came down on the house like a lid. She did not weep, nor call out, nor waste one motion. That was the gift the claim had beaten into her. 2 years of doing the next chore while the sky did its worst. She dressed like a fire was in the house. Boots, oilcloth, the lantern useless but taken anyway. One look at Sadie's note, folded once into her breast pocket next to the skin. She threw the saddle on the wagon horse with shaking hands. Then she was riding east in the first fat drops, through 10 miles of dark going wild. The rain caught her properly at the halfway hills, a gray wall walking. She bent to the horse's neck and rode through it. Lightning stood the whole country up in white, dune, yucca, streaming grass, then slammed it back into dark. She rode by the flashes. She thought of nothing. She dared not think about what might be waiting. She kept her mind on the riding. The Wright house showed no lamp until her fist was on the door. It opened before the 3rd blow. Michael stood in it half-dressed with the light behind him. She watched him read her, night, horse, oilcloth, face, in the time it takes a man to go pale. "The children," Lily said. Rain ran off her chin. "Both of them, gone together, since dark. She left me a note. Michael, they're out in it." He looked at her one instant longer. Every hour of the silent weeks stood between them on that doorsill. The quarrel, the windmill words, the wall with the door in it, all of it suddenly small as nothing. Then it was gone, all of it, blown out like a lamp in wind. He was gone from the doorway. She heard him at the bunk, at the wall where the ropes hung, heard him say something short and terrible to the empty bed. Then he was beside her in the streaming yard in his slicker, throwing the saddle on the bay. His voice, when it came, was the flat, level voice of a man laying his whole life on a counter. Where would he head? The creek. She'd have gone along the creek to meet him. It's the only road she knows in the dark. Lily was up on the wagon horse again, hair streaming. The crossing, Michael. He'd make for the crossing, and west for the railroad. It's what I'd do at 10 with his heart in me. Michael swung up. Lightning took the yard, and in it she saw his face. It was gray as hers. It was hers. One fear and two bodies. No walls anywhere. Nothing left over to be proud with. If either had been told one season gone what the ending of their war would cost, both would have laughed. One white look, traded in a streaming yard. Nobody laughed now. Their pride had run up a debt, and now the children were paying it. That's how it goes when grown folks let a quarrel stand too long. Then we ride the creek, he said. They went out of the yard side by side into the roaring dark, and the storm came down on the sandhills with its whole weight. Behind them, before them, everywhere, the hills had gone to black water and howling grass. 10,000 dunes all alike, swallowing sound, swallowing lantern light, swallowing two children whole, somewhere out in the middle of it. And the creek that had run all summer as a trickle a child could step over was taking every drop the sky could send. It began to rise. Chapter 15. The storm settled onto the sandhills and meant to stay the night. Rain came in sheets, then in ropes, riding a wind that leaned on horse and rider both. Lightning walked the hills on every side, white legs stalking down out of the black. Flash and crack came so close together that the two ran into one long tearing. The world shrank to the streaming circle a horse could see, and the dark ate every landmark whole. No ridgeline, no star. Not one lamp anywhere on earth. They had ridden out with a lantern apiece, and the storm made a joke of both inside the mile. Wind snuffed one at the first ridge. The other showed nothing but rain driving sideways through its small circle of yellow light. They rode by the lightning instead, which came free, terrible, everywhere. By its light, the hills looked like the sea in the worst kind of dream, standing waves of grass, no shore anywhere. They rode the creek line east of the crossing first, calling. It was madness to call against that wind, and they did it anyway, hour on hour. They rode 20 yards apart so their voices might rake a wider strip of dark. Danny, Sadie, Danny. The storm took every cry, shredded it, and paid nothing back. Between calls they listened, heads down, rain drumming their hats for anything, a wail, a whistle, one thin thread of sound in all that roaring. Nothing came. They rode on and called again. An hour of that is long. 3 are a lifetime. She learned that night how big the dark is when the ones you love are lost out in it. 4 small boots, somewhere in all that water. Tracking was gone. That was the first hope to die, and it died early. Whatever small prints the night had held, the rain had beaten them back into the general mud inside the first hour. The country had 10,000 hills, every one alike. Any fold of any one of them could be holding 2 children, huddled small, invisible, at 30 feet. You could ride within an arm's reach of the children out here and never know it. Twice they swung down to walk the likeliest folds on foot, leading the horses, feeling ahead with their boots for washouts hidden in the dark. Twice the folds gave them nothing but old cattle beds and water. Each empty fold cost minutes. And every minute somewhere, the rain was raising that creek higher. Lily quit being cold somewhere in the second hour. Quit feeling the horse, the rain, her own hands. All of it burned away, and what was left was one clear fact, ringing in the dark like struck iron. The little ones were in this. Somewhere in this. She made bargains while she rode the way people do in the dark hours, with God, with the storm, with whatever was listening. Take the claim. Take the hay, the well, the whole 2 years. Take Ohio with every mile of it. Only not the small ones. Only not that. Fear does queer things to the walls people build. For 3 weeks, 2 grown people had ridden 10 careful miles apart, nursing their hurts, too proud to send one word across. 1 hour of this dark had burned the whole of it off like trash off new ground. There was no widow riding that creek line, and no widower, no quarrel, no windmill, no economy. There were 2 parents, half mad with the same fear, quartering the same dark for the same small bones. She knew it plainly, riding. The word the county had talked around all year rode with them both now, and both of them felt it. They met at the head of a blind draw to breathe the horses, knee to knee, streaming. Nothing on the east reach. Michael had been shouting for hours, and his voice had gone to a rasp with edges on it. "Water's making faster than I like, Lily." The creek was over the flat gravel bar when we crossed. That was an hour back. It'll be in the willows now. He'd not try water in the dark. Her own voice had gone ragged. He's careful. There was never a carefuller child born. He'd not. Careful and 10 years old, Michael said, with the girl on his hands, with everything he's running from behind him. The lightning stood him up white, hat streaming, eyes terrible. Care runs out in water. It comes up so quiet, and then it isn't quiet. I've seen grown men misjudge this country's water on a dry day, and this... He stopped. He turned his face away into the rain. The next flash showed his shoulders. They were shaking, and it was not the cold. Michael, I cannot do it twice. It tore out of him ragged, half into the wind. Here was the truth he had carried hidden all year, said at last in the worst hour of all. You hear me. I buried a boy once already, 4 years old, in a week. God knows how I lived past it, by going dead myself. I cannot lose that boy out there in the water tonight, nor the girl, nor you. All summer I had the whole of it back. Then I let a quarrel take it. I let my own coward heart. The wind took half his words. The half that arrived carried everything. If we don't find them, there's no wall in the world thick enough for what's left of me. I built 3 years of them. They're paper, Lily. They were always paper. Lily reached through the rain and gripped his hand on the pommel, hard, cold fingers around a cold fist. She held on the way you hold a rope with weight on it. Then hear mine, and we're square. The lightning stood the world up again, and she set it into his face, over the storm, with no pride left anywhere in her body. I was a fool and a coward, the pair. You offered me everything you had the strength to offer, and I priced it like the county. I threw it back. My pride wanted grander words. Then I let the silence run, because being right was such a warm thing to sleep with. Well, I'm cured. None of it matters, Michael. Not the words, not the walls, not whose grief is whose. There's nothing in the world tonight but those 2 babies alive. You, the finding of them. Everything else can go down this creek, and I'll not chase it. The rain roared on the grass. His fist turned inside her fingers and closed around them. Neither said one word more. There was no need, no time, no breath to spare. But something passed between the 2 cold hands in the dark, and there was no mistaking what it was. Both of them took it in and held it safe. Then they turned back to the dark. West Reach, Michael rasped. The crossing. If he's making for the railroad, the crossing is the one door, and the water. He did not finish. They rode. After that, they worked the West Reach like people possessed. Ridge to fold, fold to ridge, calling on the downwind legs, listening on the up. The rain never slacked. The cold got into the horses. Somewhere behind the boiling sky, the moon crossed over, unseen, and the night wore on toward the small hours when hope gets thin. Neither said the word aloud. Both rode as if outrunning it. Out at the crossing, the world was water. The children had reached it a long hour before, with the storm's first full weight just arriving, and found the creek already wrong. Danny had stood on the bank in the flickering dark and rid it, and what it said was too late. The friendly summer trickle had gone. Something gray and heavy slid past in its place, mounting while he watched it. It dragged whole hanks of grass off the banks and swallowed them without a sound, too wide to cross. Behind them, when he turned, the low swale they had come up was filling too. Quiet as a thief, water finding water in the dark. He did the sums fast, one time, and they came out one way. The shelf. The high hummock of the Sunday ground stood up off the flat like a fist, the island where the blue quilt had spread all summer. High ground till morning. He got Sadie up it as the swale closed behind them. They sat down among the roots of the big willow to let the storm pass over. The storm did not pass over, and the water did not stop. Danny worked while there was working to do. He broke willow branches and built the girl a windbreak of sorts against the trunk. The bread came out and she ate. He made himself eat too. He wrung out Mrs. Pig, solemn as a surgeon, because Sadie's courage rested on that doll. Then the water took the sandbar where the boats had raced all summer. After that, there was nothing left to build with or eat or wring. It came up with a patience that was worse than fury. An inch, another inch, eating the hummock's skirts. First the flat went, then the low grass, then the willow's outmost roots. Danny watched it by the lightning, flash on flash, marking its line against a root, then against a stone, then against the stone above. Every mark was higher. Every flash the island was smaller. Sadie was long past walking anywhere, soaked and shaking, folded up against his chest under his coat with the doll crushed between them. "Danny," she said, small, against him, "the water's coming on. I know it. Will it come up all the way?" He looked at the black water sliding where the Sunday quilt had spread. He was 10 years old, and he had never lied to her, not once. That was the one law of the nation of Flynn, and he did not lie now. "It might," he said. "So we'll climb as it comes. We'll holler between the thunder. We'll hold on, Sadie. That's all the plan there is now. We hold on." She nodded against his chest, one small jerk of her soaked head. Then she did the bravest thing he ever saw anybody do in a long life to come of watching people be brave. She got her feet under her and stood up in that howling rain. Then she filled her lungs and sent her cry out into the dark between two thunderclaps, high, thin, clear. She aimed it the only direction help had ever come from in all her life. "Lily?" The wind took it. She hauled her breath and sent it again. Half a mile down that boiling dark, between one thunderclap and the next, a horse threw its head up, and two riders went stone still in the streaming night, listening with their whole bodies. It came once more, tattered to a thread by wind and water, thin as a killdeer over the flood, a child's cry, from the crossing. Lily's heart stopped, started, and near broke. Michael was already turning the bay. "The creek," he said, and his rasp cracked clean through. "It's at the creek. Ride." They rode. Chapter 16. The lightning showed it to them whole, a quarter-mile out, and Lily would carry the picture to her grave. Where the crossing had been, where the Sunday ground had been, there was a moving gray plain of water. Wide as a river it ran, seamed with drift and foam, over all the ground where the summer's Sundays had been. Out in the middle of it, ringed round, stood what was left of the high hummock. An island now the size of a wagon bed, with the old willow leaning off it into the flood. On the island, in the white flash, two small figures, one standing, braced against the willow, holding the other up out of the water's reach. Then dark slammed down and Lily was riding. She heard herself saying "no, no, no" in time to the horse, like a prayer worn down to one word. They came off the last slope to the water's edge, and the flood was louder than the storm. It had a voice like a fire which she had not known. A low tearing roar, full of grinding, of drowned grass hissing, of the knock of driftwood going under. The bank they stood on had been the picnic shelf's approach all summer. Water ran over it now, ankle deep, pulling. "Danny!" Michael's ruined voice went out across the flood. "Hold on, boy, we're here." The lightning answered before the boy could. It showed him plain, 30 feet out across that sliding gray. Up to his shins he stood, back against the willow, Sadie held high against his chest. It showed his face turned toward them, white, spent, wide-eyed, and it showed, all around the two of them, the island's rim crumbling into the current in slow bites. A sandbar goes that way from under. 30 feet. It might as well have been 500 miles. Being close only made it crueler. Lily's mind ran the distances once cold, the way minds do at such moments. No boat in 20 miles, no bridge nearer than town, and no time for either, with the island going by inches. Whatever was to be done would be done here, in the next quarter hour, by two grown people, one rope and a horse. Rope. Michael was off the bay at his saddle, tearing the lariat loose, his hands sure and terribly quick. He had gone past fear into the cold steadiness where some men do their finest work, and his voice came out level. "It won't reach a throw, not in this wind. I'm going in on it. You dally the end to your saddle horn and keep the horse square. What comes back along this rope, you haul. Whatever you feel, you haul, Lily. You hear me. You haul, and you don't stop hauling." Michael. One word. There was a sermon in it, the current, the drift going down, the size of him against the size of that water. He looped the rope's end hard around his chest, under the arms, and knotted it the way a man knots his last knot. For one heartbeat, in the flickering dark, he looked at her, rain pouring off the both of them. "I stood by once before in my life and did nothing," he said. That was at a bedside. Never again. Keep the rope. He walked into the flood. There are sights a person keeps forever, wanted or not, and Lily got one there. A big man walking down into black moving water by lightning, rope at his chest, head bent as if into wind. Behind him on the bank, every quarrel they had ever had counted for nothing now. All of it washed away in the rain. The water hit him like stock breaking a chute. She saw him stagger at knee depth, catch, lean upstream, and set into it, one driving step at a time. The current piled a white wave up his chest. It had the whole weight of the drowned hills behind it, and it tried, every step, to take his feet from under him. The rope paid out through Lily's hands. She had the end dallied to the horn, the wagon horse squared and trembling, her boots dug into the running bank. Her heart was out in the gray water with a rope tied to it. 10 feet, 20. He went down once, wholly, gone, and the rope slammed tight against the dally. The world stopped until his head and shoulders broke water again, still driving. A cottonwood limb the size of a fence post came down the current and missed his skull by the width of a hat. Keep off the upstream side, he roared at the island, at the boy, waiting, spitting flood. It's cutting. Stand center. I'm coming. Then he was there. Lightning caught it, his hand closing on the willow, the island's rim breaking under his boots. 2 children and a man stood on ground, going to porridge. On the bank, Lily hauled the rope slack and made ready to take the whole world's weight. What happened out there took 2 minutes. She would see it in her mind for the rest of her life. She saw him crouch, saw the quick work at his chest, and understood. He was not coming back across with both. He had freed the rope from himself. Now he was lashing it, swift and sure, around the small body of Sadie. Haul! His voice came down the wind. Haul now. Lily hauled. She backed the horse and hauled with her whole body, hand over hand against the current's terrible sideways drag. Out in the gray, a small, bundled shape came off the island into the water. It rode high, pulled fast, swinging down the current in an arc like a watch on its chain. The flood grabbed at it the whole way. The rope sang. Then, behind the small swinging shape, the island quit. It did not crumble by inches, as it had crumbled all night. It simply quit, all at once. The willow heeled over into the current with a tearing groan. Roots, earth, the last of the Sunday shelf, all going down into gray. Where a man and a boy had stood, waiting their turn, there was only flood. Michael? For one heart-stopped moment, the water had all 3 of them at once. Sadie mid-current, swinging on the line. The man and the boy gone under the gray somewhere, loose, with no rope on them at all. Lily Keeney stood on that bank with her whole life out in the water, every piece of it. There was one thing left in the world to do. She hauled. She never remembered it as strength. It was past strength, with no name she knew. The rope tore through her gripped hands, checked, held. The horse backed under her urging. Her boots plowed the mud. Her whole body laid against the pull of all that flooding water. Something in her chest made a low sound over and over. Sadie's name, or his, or the boy's, or all 3 braided. The current swung its small catch down and shoreward, the way it swings everything. The line held, and the arc came home. Then the shallows had it. Then her own 2 arms had it, streaming and coughing. Sadie, coughing, which was breathing, alive, whole, hers. The child's arms clamped her neck, clamped tight with all the love of that whole summer. For 2 heartbeats, Lily allowed it, the weight, the warmth, the fact of her. Then she unwound the small arms, because the night's work was only half done. She set the child high on the dry bank slope with one command, stay, in a voice not hers. Then she turned back to the flood that had the other 2. The gray water ran full of wreckage, willow limbs, torn sod, the ruin of the island, all of it going down into the dark. She could not see them anywhere. She ran the bank downstream, calling his name into the roar, and the storm gave her nothing back. Then, out in the middle, a head broke water. Michael came up swimming, if swimming is the word for work done one-armed against that current, with the boy locked against his chest. He could not fight straight across. Nobody living could have. So he fought the water's grain instead, clawing shoreward by inches, giving the flood its yardage downstream for every foot it yielded him. The current, having played with its catch, swung the 2 of them at last the way it had swung the child. Down past the bend they came, into the slack water under the cut bank. A hand came out of the shallows and gripped mud. Then the rest of him, heaving, monstrous with water, the boy still locked under one arm. Both came up out of the flood, coughing like the newly born. He made 3 steps of the pulling water and went to his knees in the shallows. He did not fall. Falling meant the boy went under, so he did not fall. Lily got them. She was in the shallows without deciding, hands on the boy, hands on the man, dragging. The 3 of them came up the streaming bank together in a ruin of rope and mud. They made the grass where Sadie stood crying their names, and there, all together, in a heap, they went down. For a while, nobody moved. The 4 of them lay tangled in the streaming grass, one pile of soaked, living bodies, gasping, coughing. The rain hammered down on them, and none of it mattered at all. Sadie had burrowed into the middle of everybody. From somewhere inside the pile, her voice rose, small, waterlogged, stern, informing the storm that Mrs. Pig had gotten wet clean through, that Danny had held her up the whole time, that she had hollered as loud as ever she could. Nobody laughed. Nobody could have. The pile only pulled in tighter, the way stock stands in weather. Danny, half drowned, had not let go of Michael's slicker. His fist stayed locked in it past the water, past the rescue, past sense. When Michael tried to ease him loose to see him breathe, the whole body came with the fist. The man quit trying and held him instead. Lily knelt up at last in the mud and made her count. 1 girl, wrapped already in her own numb arms. 1 boy, breathing, wept over, alive inside the man's slicker. And 1 man. The man sat in the mud with the boy in his arms, head bowed over him. His shoulders began to shake at last, the way stone cracks all at once after holding for years. Nobody remarked on it. Rain stood on everybody's face alike, and that was the mercy of rain. Her eyes met his across the 2 children in the rain, by the light of the storm walking away east over the hills. Neither said anything. The flood roared on 6 feet away, robbed. The lightning came slower now. By one long blue-white reach of it they looked at each other, 2 people kneeling in mud with a rescued child clutched apiece. Everything had gone out of them twice over. Pride, walls, words, breath, and both saw the same plain truth at last, sitting in the wreckage where it had been all year. There was no arrangement to make, no arithmetic, no bargain, no word to walk around. They were already a family. They had been one for a long time. All that was left was to say so in the daylight. Chapter 17. Lily's soddy was the nearest roof in the world, and the world, deep in the night, let them reach it. The storm was breaking up behind them as they came down the last hill, still grumbling, dragging its skirts of rain away east. Michael rode with Danny wrapped in the slicker against his chest. Lily carried Sadie before her, a small heaviness gone boneless with sleep. The girl woke only once, at the yard gate, to ask if this was the place they had picked. "It's home," Lily said. "Sleep." The house received them the way sod houses do, thick-walled, dark, holding yesterday's warmth like a kettle off the boil. Lily built the fire high while Michael saw to the spent horses. Then the 2 of them turned to the children. For a while there was no talk in the house at all, only work, the old kind, older than talk. Wet clothes stripped away and hung streaming from the rafter hooks. 2 small bodies chafed pink with rough toweling, then buttoned warm. Sadie went into her nightgown. Danny went into an old flannel shirt of her husband's that hung on him like a preacher's robe. Warm milk with honey, spooned half asleep into both of them. Bread they were too far gone to finish. The children could not be parted, even for sleeping. Nobody tried. Michael carried in water and set the big kettle on, unasked. He found his way around her kitchen with the odd sureness of a man who had kept his own 3 years. Between them, the work divided itself without one word of arranging. She thought of that later. Some people are in the way in a kitchen, all elbows. He was the other kind from the first hour. Lily turned back the quilts on the narrow bed, and the 2 of them went down into it together like one creature. Sadie burrowed into her brother's side. Danny's arm went over her. Guarding something safe at last, Mrs. Pig, wrung out and re-wrung, was set to dry on the stone hearth where the girl could see her from the pillow. She was asleep before the doll was settled. Danny lasted a minute longer. His eyes followed Lily around the lamp-lit room, then found Michael, big in the corner, steam rising off him. We'd have been all right, the boy said from far under. It was the old flat voice, gone blurry. But I'm glad you came. Sleep, son, Michael said. The word was out of him before he heard it coming. Son. It hung in the warm room, enormous, and the boy heard it. His eyes closed over something that was almost a smile. Then he was gone, down into sleep like a stone into a well. Then the house was quiet. Lily stood over the bed a long while before she could leave it, counting breaths the way a miser counts coin. 12 for the girl, slower for the boy. The lamplight lay over the two faces, washed clean of the night. Her heart, she thought, would come out of her body entirely, watching them. Near lost. Both of them, near lost, twice over in 1 year. She pulled the quilt an inch higher for her own sake, not theirs, and went to the fire. At whatever hour of the turned-over night it was, the two children lay breathing slow in the one bed, tangled together, safe, whole. The fire talked in the stove. The storm was a far-off grumble now, a wagon going away over hills. On the rafters, the wet clothes dripped, slower, slower, marking the time like a clock winding down. And by the fire, in two chairs pulled close for warmth, sat Lily Keeney and Michael Wright. Blankets hung around their shoulders like two survivors of a wreck, which was what they were. There was nothing left to hide behind. That was the plain fact of that hour, and both of them knew it. Pride had gone somewhere in the flood. Fear had burned itself out on the ride, in the calling, in the rope. The careful terms, the Mr. Wright and the Mrs. Keeney. The whole careful politeness of two proud people was gone, left out in the storm somewhere. What sat by that fire was only a man and a woman, spent to the last thread, watching two children breathe. Once, Lily got up to lay wood on the fire, passing the bed to tuck a small foot back under the quilt. Once, Michael rose, restless, to the window, checking a sky already spent. Both of them were keeping watch over the same small household. Neither remarked on the others. Lily poured coffee, and her hands shook doing it. Now that shaking cost nothing. "Drink it," she said. "You swallowed half the creek." "Most of it twice," Michael said. It was not much of a joke. It was the first he had ever made her. They laughed at it longer than it earned, the emptied-out laughter of people lately let off a hook. He drank it. Over the cup's rim his eyes never left the bed, as if the breathing might stop the moment a grown fool looked away. She understood that. Her own eyes kept the same watch between one task and the next. For a long time, that was all it was. Two people, a stove, hot coffee going cold. The clock on the shelf ticked through the small hours, and neither moved to count them. Weariness of that depth is a kind of honesty. Whatever got said next to that fire would be true, because nobody had strength left to build anything else. The fire settled. Out of its small noise at last, Michael began to speak. When the willow went. His voice was a ruin, rasped down to gravel by the night's calling. He spoke slowly into the stove's light like a man laying stones one on another. When the ground quit under us, the water had the three of us at once. All I had hold of was the boy, and a rope I couldn't see the end of. And there was a moment there, Lily, one whole moment, when I thought it was done. All of it. Him, me, the girl if the knot failed. You on that bank, left to live past the sight of it. The lamp hissed gently. Lily said nothing, and her silence was a kind of hand held out. "A man learns what he is in such a moment," Michael said. "I'll tell you what I learned, because I mean never to unlearn it. I wasn't afraid of the water. Drowning is quick, and I've been slow drowning 3 years, so it held no news for me. What I could not stand, what turned me into something that could wade that creek, was the other thing." He turned from the fire then and looked at her. "Losing you all, having found the whole of it again, warmth, noise, a family sitting one blanket over, and losing it before I'd once had the courage to call it by its name. Michael, let me get it said." He set the cup down. His big hands hung between his knees, and he looked at them the way a man looks at tools that have failed him. "That day at the creek with the quilt, the arrangement I offered you, you called it a windmill deal, and you were right. I have eaten that rightness every day since, but you were wrong about one thing in it, and tonight I find I can't lie down until it's straightened." The fire ticked. In the bed, one of the children sighed, turned, settled. "It was never business, Lily." He said it plain, worn-out plain, past all performing. "There's the shame of it. The business talk was a coat I put on it. A man can't have his heart broken over business. I wanted you. I had wanted you since the morning you stood in the rain, taking my hide off over a runaway boy. It scared me witless, wanting. I'd buried everything I ever wanted once already. So I came to you with a contract, like a coward, offering you everything I had except the one thing you'd have taken. The next breath cost him something. It was a frightened man's way of reaching for the thing he wanted most in the world and daring not name it. That's the whole truth of that day. You were never a solution to anything, woman. You were what I wanted. The room stood very still around those words. Out in the dark, the windmill turned over once, slow and stilled. A coal settled in the stove. Lily discovered that her hands had stopped shaking at some point in his speaking, and that she had not noticed when. Lily looked at him, this great weathered man gone hoarse and humble by her fire. The creek's mud was still in the seams of his hands. Those hands had gone into black water on a rope's promise. Somewhere in her chest was the last wall, the one rebuilt so carefully after the quarrel, mortared with pride, defended all season. It made a small sound now, like river ice in March, and went. She thought of the year entire watching him, the shut face in the Grange hall that she had summed so wrongly, a doll stitched with harness thread, the bolt wrapped in sacking, apples, a whittled horse, the hollow words at her door that had rung so false because they were false, a starving man reciting arithmetic. She thought of him black-faced at her fire-guard, gray-faced in her doorway at midnight, chest-deep in the flood, with her whole world under his one arm, wanted for herself. She had demanded that coin all year, held out for it, driven off everything less. It had been on the table since summer. Only his words had been poor, and she had judged the words instead of the man. "You'll want to know why I'm not answering," she said at last, and her own voice had gone rough. "It's that I've spent this whole year being clever, Michael. Clever about coins, clever about windmills, and all my cleverness left me with nothing. I sat in this room with your offer and heard everything in it but the man drowning behind it. So I'm done talking clever tonight. I haven't the strength anyway." The distance between the two chairs was nothing, a foot of firelit air. For 3 weeks, that foot of air had been wide as 10 miles. Neither of them had dared cross it. Lily reached across it in the sight of the sleeping children and took his hand. Just that, her small cracked hand into his big cracked one, the two of them scarred with the same rope. His fingers closed around hers the way they had closed in the storm, a man taking hold of something he did not mean to lose twice. The fire burned low. The children breathed. Outside, the last of the storm walked away over the hills, taking the old year's weather with it. Gray morning came up slow in the window. How long they sat that way, neither ever knew nor asked. Two asleep, two holding on, in a house made of earth that had kept them all. Neither of them let go. Chapter 18. The fire burned low, and neither moved to build it up, for fear of moving at all. Hand in hand, in the small, warm dark, with the lamp turned down to a thumbnail of light, the two of them went on talking. Not the way they had talked on the Sunday quilt, planks laid careful over deep water. This was the other kind, the kind that comes once in a life or twice, when everything has been lost and found in one night. Talking was easy now, because the worst had already happened and been faced. The buried things came up, all of them, one by one, into the low light. The children slept through the whole of it, which was a mercy past pricing. Every so often one of the two would turn or sigh, and both grown heads came around together, waited, settled back. It gave the talk its measure. Nothing was said in that room all night that could not have borne a child waking into the middle of it. "I'll say the whole of it now," Michael told her, "while I've the nerve. What I want is not a housekeeper. My house is clean as a jail, and I keep it so with my own hands. It can stay so till doomsday. What I want is not a mother for the boy, though you'd be that, nor hands for the proving up, though I mean to see you proved. What I want, Lily, is you. The quick of you, the stubborn of you, the warm of you, entire. A woman who prices windmills. The one who laughs with her whole head back. If you came to me with empty hands, owning one dress, the day you walked through my door would still be that house's richest day." Lily was quiet a moment. Under her fingers, his pulse went steady, hard, a working beat. I feared being married for my use, she said. It was the one fear I had left, so I fed it everything. I told myself you looked at me the way the county looked and counted hens, and all the while. She shook her head slowly. You mended a doll with harness thread, Michael. You brought a bolt for a mower and hid it in sacking as if being kind were shameful. A man shopping for a windmill doesn't do those things. I was loved for myself all along and was too busy guarding against the counterfeit to see the coin lying in plain sight. A whole summer lying there. A whole summer, he agreed, and a quarrel wasted on top of it. Well, said Lily, we're neither of us quick, whatever else may be said for us. The laugh they shared then was small and cost nothing, being at their own expense. And what is it you want, then? Michael asked her. You've heard my whole inventory. I'd hear yours. Lily considered it, looking at the fire, and gave him the true answer. Somebody to be tired next to, she said. That's the whole of my list, Michael. 2 years I've done every last thing on this place alone and borne it. It was the evenings that nearly finished me. I want the day's work talked over. I want somebody to look at when a thing is funny. Once I had that, so I know exactly what I'm asking for, and it isn't hands. Somebody to be tired next to, he said, slow, like a man being handed the answer to a long sum. That I can do. God knows I've the tired part mastered. Then we'll do, Lily said. The rest is trimmings. Later, deep in that night, he spoke of the dead, and this was what she would remember when she was old, that he did not flinch doing it. Her name was Ellen, Michael said. The name came out level and clear into the lamplight, like a man setting something long carried down on a table. 3 years, that name had lived behind his teeth. She watched him find that it could be spoken, that the roof stayed on, that the night went on being warm. Ellen, he said again, easier. She sang over the stove off the note every day of 10 years. The boy was Will. He asked why at the whole world, sun up to dark. Why does the wind? Why does the rooster? Why? I'd give a crop to be asked one more time. The firelight moved on his face, and his face bore it. I couldn't say their names, Lily, all this time. It felt like every time I said their names, I used them up, like there was only so much left. That's how a man gets alone. Everything becomes the last of something. John, Lily said softly, giving hers into the same light. Mine was John. He'd sing too, and his was worse. He never could mow a straight land either, Michael said. You told me that once at the creek, sideways the way we did it all summer. You remembered. I remember every plank of that bridge, Lily. It was all I had. They sat with the 2 names between them like guests, and it was not sorrowful. That was the wonder of that hour. It was the opposite of sorrowful, some kind of communion. 4 names in a warm room, 2 of them living, 2 of them remembered. Outside, far off, a coyote said something to the night. Got no answer. Let it be. The lamp drew its small breath. In the bed, a child turned over, sighed, slept on. The world went along quietly around the 4 names, entirely unscandalized. I'll tell you the strangest thing, Michael said at last. I feared loving you would be a robbery, that whatever I gave you was taken from them, off their graves, out of their store. It's why I fought it the whole year. He turned her hand over in his, carefully, as though checking it for the flood's damage. It isn't robbery. I can't say the sense of it. But tonight, saying her name to you is the first time in 3 years that being alive has felt like living, not only enduring. Ellen set great store by living. I think I've been insulting her these 3 years, calling what I did by her memory's name. You have, said Lily. I insulted John 2 years running the same way. They'd neither of them thank us for it. No, Michael said. They'd neither of them thank us. It seemed to both of them that the room grew easier after that, as if a long question had finally been answered. The lamp burned small. Away east, past the window, the sky had begun the first gray business of morning. Then Michael Wright let go of her hand and stood. She watched him gather himself the way he had gathered on the flood's bank, a man arranging his whole weight around one necessary act. He did not kneel, there being no room between the chairs and the sleeping children. He stood before her in her own small house, head bent under her rafters, turning his hat in his 2 hands like any Sunday suitor. She looked up at him with her heart going like a girl's. I asked you once for the children's sake and the land's. It was a lie with good manners. His ruined voice was quiet, so as not to wake the bed. It shook, and he let it shake. So I'll ask it now the true way, for my own sake, and you may weigh every word on any scale in Nebraska. Lily Keeney, I am a shut-up, half-mended man, still learning to say names out loud. I've little grace, no quickness, and 3 years of bad habits with walls, and I am wholly past every defense I ever built, in love with you. The hat went still in his hands. Will you marry me? Not the windmill, not the housekeeper, you, because the plain truth is this. I don't want any of it, the claims, the seasons, the whole of what's left me, unless it's you beside me. The fire ticked twice. In the narrow bed, small and even, 2 children breathed. Lily stood up to answer him. It seemed an answer to be given standing. Yes, she said. The word came out of her whole, unhedged, with no clever left anywhere in it. His face began to change. 7%. She took hold of the front of his shirt with both hands and finished, because the whole truth was owed by both parties now. And you'll hear my accounting, Michael Wright, so there's never a doubt between us about what was bought and what was given. I'm not saying yes for the lien, though you'll pay it, and I'll let you. My pride can eat its supper cold. Nor am I saying yes for those 2 in the bed, though God knows they've earned it, scheming like railroad men all summer. Her eyes were bright, her chin up, her voice gone thick. I'm saying yes for me, for the sake of a man who stitched a doll gravely, who fought a fire at my shoulder and walked into black water on one thin rope. I'm saying yes because somewhere between a Grange Hall and a flood, I came to love you. I'm done being too proud to spend it, for my own sake. Mine first, theirs after. Now you know the terms. The terms, said Michael Wright, are accepted. What came then had no words in it. He bent his head, and she rose on her toes. In the small gray-gold beginning of that morning, by the last of the fire, they sealed a bargain with no hedge in it anywhere. The only such either had ever made. It was a long, quiet kiss, asked for nothing and given for nothing. It was the first gift in a year that neither of them weighed. When they parted, the window had gone pale. Somewhere out in the wet world, a meadowlark, the first since the storm, tried the morning and found it good. The children, Lily whispered, half laughing, her forehead against his chest. What will we tell them? They'll crow over us till Christmas. Sadie will inform the county. Let her, Michael said into her hair. It was their campaign. The generals may as well have the victory. They stood a while at the window then, his arm around her, watching the light come up over the drowned and shining hills. There was a world of work out there. A creek to bridge new, fences to mend, 2 claims to fold into one, a wedding to stand up to before the watching county. It could all wait 1 hour. Everything, for once, could wait 1 hour. And in the narrow bed across the room, unremarked by 2 grown people busy being in love, a boy's eyes closed themselves with great care. They had been open for some little while. Danny Flynn had heard terms offered and terms accepted. He lay still as a stone with his sister's head on his arm, adding it up twice in the dark, to be sure. Then, entirely satisfied, the field marshal of the nation of Flynn allowed himself to fall asleep. Chapter 19. Chapter 19. The children were told over breakfast, and the telling did not go as the grown-ups had rehearsed it. Lily had planned a careful little speech, suitable for tender ages. She got 4 words of it out. Then Sadie set down her spoon. All morning the girl had watched the 2 adults hand plates to each other like a pair of moonstruck calves. Now she asked, with 6-year-old directness, whether the wedding would have cake at it. There was a silence. You were asleep, Lily said, without much hope. Danny told me, said Sadie serenely. This morning early. He heard the whole thing. We voted. You voted. It carried, Danny said. Lily put down the coffee pot and looked at the 2 of them, a whole summer of scheming, sitting there buttering bread. The speech gave itself up entirely. There was nothing in it these 2 had not known before the grown-ups knew it. There will be cake, she said, since that was the only question the children had left open. Sadie nodded, satisfied, and moved that the wedding be soon. The boy was working through his eggs with his usual gravity. But something in his face had come loose at last, held tight since Omaha. Gladness kept leaking out at the corners of his mouth. Michael looked at him down the table. Here sat the small field marshal who had loosened wheels, hidden watches, run away into a flood, and won every last thing he campaigned for. "You've nothing to say beyond that?" Michael asked him. Danny considered, fork in the air, and gave his judgment. "Took you long enough," he said, which was when Michael Wright laughed until the coffee slopped, the second time in 1 year, and the new family's first morning was underway. They drove to town that same week to see the preacher, all four together, since nobody proposed to be left home. The news ran the county ahead of the wagon, the way news does. By the time the team was tied at the church lot, the storekeeper's wife was out on her porch, not even pretending to sweep it. The county had its turn within the week, and the county's turn was the land agent. He came up the draw on the Thursday, pink and sorrowful, with the relinquishment papers in his case. He was solemn as a man come to a funeral. What he found in the yard was Michael Wright's team, and Michael Wright himself mending the windmill head. Below the tower stood the widow Keeney, laughing up at him in a way no doomed woman laughs. The agent took his hat off slowly. "Mrs. Keeney," he said, "I've a feeling I've missed some news." They told him, together, standing close, the way news of that kind wants telling. To his lasting credit, the agent's face did not fall by so much as a button's worth. It did the opposite, broke clean open into gladness, and he shook Michael's hand hard enough to pump water. "The lien," he began then, recovering his office. "You'll understand it still stands, wedding or no. The Omaha men will want their figure by the date, and sentiment won't." "You'll take a draft on the Loup Crossing bank," Michael said. "Today, if your papers allow. I'd sooner it were done before the ink dries on anything else, whatever the figure is, with the interest entire." The agent looked at Michael a moment, then wrote it out at Lily's own table. And Lily stood at her window while the two men squared the paper that had lived on her shelf like a coal all season. Her eyes stung, and she let them. John's debt, from John's one bad year, paid at John's own table by the man who was to come after him. There was an order in it somewhere, deep like the grain in wood. At the buggy, the agent paused, hat in hand, the last time that yard would ever see him. "I told you once the day was coming when you'd be glad to see me." He smiled at Lily, rueful, kind. "I've been wrong in the particulars all year, ma'am. I never was gladder to be sent off empty-handed in my life. Whatever's grown on this claim, it beats any crop in my book." Then he was dust down the draw, gone for good. Lily discovered a person can grow almost fond at the end of the man who carried their trouble to the door. Tom Bergen got the word off his own tailgate, mid-delivery, and had to sit down on a sack of flour. Then he drove his whole route out of order, telling it at every gate. The entire time he claimed, loudly, to have seen it coming from the first apple. They were married on a bright, cold Saturday at the little Sandhill church in the last of October, with the whole county looking on. That was the thing Lily never got over, the county. She had braced herself for a thin crowd of the dutiful. The county had watched her 2 years, patient as a cat, waiting for the widow to fail. Now the widow was doing the opposite. It turned out the watching had not been waiting for her to fail. Somewhere along the way, it had turned into caring. Folks came from 30 miles. Wagons stood 3 deep at the church lot, teams stamping in the cold, the way they had stood at the Grange Hall in the spring. Lily moved among them in her one good dress made over, and could not find anywhere in her the old hard lump of being watched. The storekeeper's wife had trimmed the church within an inch of its life, cedar along the sills, bittersweet at the windows. The seamstress had sat up 2 nights over the made-over dress, refusing pay. Winter was coming on outside with all its plainness. Inside that small white room, the county had gathered the year's last bright flowers and given them all to the 4 of them. The smith stood godfatherly by the door in a collar that was slowly strangling him. And in the second pew sat Tom Bergen, freighter, matchmaker, postmaster of the children's whole secret summer. He was scrubbed to a shine and suspiciously bright about the eyes already. Danny stood up for Michael. That was Michael's own asking, made man to man in the barn. The boy had received it the way he received everything enormous, with a level look and one nod. So he stood at the front of that church in a new coat, 10 years old, straight as a fence post, the ring he held with both hands, the way you hold a bird. When the moment came, he delivered it up without one fumble. Michael took it from him the same way it was offered, gravelly, between men who had come through hard times together. Sadie strewed the aisle. She had conducted the business like a coronation, and what she strewed was the summer itself. Out of the back of Lily's Bible had come all Danny's pressed wildflowers. The prairie roses, the blazing star, the black-eyed Susans bound once with a horsehair, a whole courting summer saved flat inside Scripture. The girl laid them down the aisle boards one by one, roses last, in front of the bride. Lily walked to her wedding over the flowers of her whole courting summer. She had not known she would cry at that. She had expected to cry at other moments, not at that one. Michael waited at the rail in his Sunday best, shaved to the bone, gray eyes not steady in the least. The man had faced fire and flood in 1 year with a level face. A small church full of neighbors undid him entirely, which the county found the best news it had heard all season. The vows were the old plain ones. The two of them said the words the way people who have been tested past the letter of every promise on the list say them, for richer, for poorer, in sickness, in health. The county heard it dry-eyed and approving. 4 people in that church heard fire, flood, lean, dark water in the old words, and were not dry-eyed in the least. One of them was the freighter in the second pew, who wept frankly into his hat, honking, entirely unashamed, until the smith pounded his back. "You may kiss the bride," said the preacher. Michael Wright kissed his wife. Sadie, unable to bear so much magnificence sitting down, stood on the pew and announced to the congregation at large that it was her family. Nobody hushed her. It was nothing but the plain truth, and the county laughed. Then the county took the 4 of them to the schoolhouse, where the tables groaned all afternoon. There was cake. Sadie, consulted as the wedding's earliest architect, pronounced it sufficient. She had 3 pieces, and Mrs. Pig got the crumbs. Home they rolled in the blue cold of early evening, all 4 in one wagon at last, under one quilt, behind one team. Home was the soddy that night, and the soddy it would be until spring, the law being the law. Her claim still wanted living on to prove, so they would keep both places going through the winter. The family's weight would rest here, the man riding his own fields daily, both houses lit. The county could wear out its wit on the arrangement all it pleased. Come the proving up, come the patent with her name on it, there would be time enough to settle which roof was best. None of that mattered the first night. What mattered was this. 2 children were put to bed in the warm corner of a house made of earth. Same room, same roof, for the first time since a Grange Hall in the spring. There was no ceremony to it. That was the whole ceremony. Sadie simply lay down, and Danny lay down on the bunk an arm's reach away. There was nothing anywhere that needed guarding, nothing to watch for out any window, nobody's leave to ask. "Danny," came the small voice in the dark, testing it. "You're here." "I'm here." "In the morning too?" "Every morning," Danny said. "That's finished now, Sadie. There's no more distance. Go to sleep." No more distance. The 10 miles were done, walked out of the world for good. The boy who had worn a path through the dark hills lay listening to his sister breathe, out of old habit. Then sleep took him too. By the stove, the lamp burned late over 2 gold rings. Beside them on the shelf lay Michael's watch, the father's watch, the stolen one, ticking away the first night with nothing left to measure. 2 hours it had counted once, doled out weekly at a creek. It could count what it pleased now. All the Sundays had run together into one for good. A mother, a father, a son, a daughter, one sod roof over the whole of it. The wind that came down off the hills that night went around the house and found every wall warm. 2 half-houses had stood alone in those hills for years, 10 miles apart, each with its graves and its silence. From that night forward, they were one whole. Chapter 20 Harvest came to the joined claim the next fall, and the joined claim met it like an army. Anyone driving the county road that September would have seen it plain. Grain stood stacked on the flat below the soddy. Fat cattle strung out along the creek on 2 ranges run as one. Hay was up at both ends of a 10-mile country, with fence tight the whole way between. The brackish well had been dug new and sweet in June. The mower ran like a watch, where one man's strength met one woman's stubbornness, pulling in a single yoke. The sandhills had done what they will always do for such people. The sandhills had yielded. The patent had come in the spring with the government's seal on it in Lily's own name. It hung framed on the soddy wall where the lean paper once lay like a coal. Both houses stood full now of what they had each stood empty of so long. Noise. That, first of everything. Light and noise. Strangers took the two of them for an old marriage that first year. Bergen swore folks could not credit the truth of it when he told it, and Tom told it everywhere, twice. It was the ease that fooled them. Some couples spend 10 years learning what a fire, a flood, and one terrible night will teach in a season. The frame house on the East Range had quit echoing entirely. There were curtains in it now, a portrait made in town, a jar of creek pebbles on the sill grown to a rank of 3. Ellen's garden bore along the whole south wall, weeded within an inch of its life by a boy who never once was asked to. The pie plant had filled its tins at last twice that summer. The family ate the pies in Ellen's kitchen, and it was not sorrowful. Some houses want scouring, others only ever wanted people. As for the soddy, it kept the family's winters, snug as a burrow. Nobody stood watching at the south window anymore. The children had thrived on the year the way young stock thrives on good grass. Danny was 11 now. The hunch was gone from his shoulders, and the flinch that had ridden him since Omaha was gone with it. He worked at Michael's side through that harvest as a matter of plain right. His stretch of wire ran the tightest on the place, his fence corners perfectly square and true. He talked now, not floods of it, that would never be his way. But at supper he would tell a thing simply because it had interested him, with no eye first to the doors. The walking ghost look was gone clean out of him. Boys at the school called him Dan Wright without thinking, and he let it stand. The two names lived in him easily, the way the two houses lived on the one land. He had never once had to walk anywhere in the dark again. Though on fine Sunday evenings, sometimes, the family walked to the halfway creek, where new willow shoots stood up green from the flood rack. Supper was eaten on the grass, where the Sunday meetings had once been bargained out between two wary households. It was only a picnic ground now. That was the victory. It was only a pretty place where the water ran. The stones were still out there too, the trail markers, 2 set upon a big one, pointing the way across the hills. Michael had found them all that first winter, riding his lines, and had left every last one standing where the boy set it. Some monuments the county builds. Some a boy builds himself, 10 years old in the dark, and they outlast the county's kind. And Sadie ran the yard. That was the whole report on Sadie, and everyone in the county had heard it delivered, at volume, personally. She ran the yard from the hen house to the corral, shouting the news of every egg. Before Michael's saddle, she rode with the great, bottomless confidence of a child who knows she is safe, ordering the landscape about. And she had informed her school, the store, the church, and one bewildered drummer at the mercantile of the facts. Srent. Her brother lived with her now. Her mother had married her father in front of everybody. Mrs. Pig had stood up with the bride. The screaming girl of the Grange Hall floor was not gone, exactly. She had simply been answered, every scream of her. What was left over came out as shouting of the other kind, the kind yards are for. She called Lily Mama now. It had happened by inches through the winter, the way ice goes out of a creek, and no one had marked the day it finished. She called Michael Papa, and had since the wedding, having voted on it privately with her brother. Mrs. Pig presided over all of it from the windowsill, one arm gone shapeless with restitching, both button eyes bright. She had crossed half a country in a flour sack, survived a Grange Hall, a runaway, a flood. Veterans are entitled to sit in the sun. There was school talk already of a Christmas program, in which Sadie had been promised a verse to speak. She rehearsed it at the stock, at the well, at anybody's stationery. The verse had 6 lines. By November, the whole family, Tom Bergen and most of the cattle, would have it by heart. On the last Sunday of that harvest, Michael walked up the rise behind the frame house, alone, carrying flowers for the small grave. Creek asters now, the wild irises being long done. He went most weeks still. That had not changed and would not. What had changed was that the walk up there no longer crushed him. He stood among his 2 crosses in the long gold light with his hat off. It was the way a man stands visiting, not the way a man stands drowning. and he told Ellen the news out loud in the plain voice he had gotten back by using it. The corn was better than any year they'd had together, he told her. At checkers, the boy had topped him at last, fair, and gloated a week. She'd have gloated right along with him. The girl had learned her letters clear through. She sang over the dishes off the note every evening, and he could not always stay in the room when she did it, but he could stay in the house now. He set the asters on the small grave, squared them. "They're safe, Ellen," he said. "The boy you never got to raise, and the girl you always wanted. Safe, loved, home. I'd have you know it wasn't wasted what you taught me. It only lay fallow a while." The wind moved the grass over the whole gold country, easy, like a hand smoothing a quilt. Michael put on his hat, walked down the rise, and turned the bay for home, the 10 miles running gold ahead of him. There was no drowning anywhere in him, going or coming. Grief lived on the place still, and always would. It had simply been given its own ground at last, up where the view was best. The rest of the land had been handed back to the living. Lily watched him ride in from the edge of John's old field. She still called it that, privately, and always would. John had broken that long, flat first of anything on the claim, killing himself by inches to do it. The joined outfit had cropped it this year, and it had borne like a promise kept. She stood at its edge in the evening light with the stubble gold around her boots. Her second husband came riding home from visiting his first wife. None of it was strange. None of it was disloyal, and she had quit expecting it to be. That was what she could never have explained to the woman in the Grange Hall, 18 months back. That woman had stood armored in her grief, holding a dead man's claim with all her strength. The heart was not a claim. It had no boundary stakes, no proving up, no relinquishment. She loved John Keeney, presently, this evening, in the stubble of his own field entire. And she loved Michael Wright, walking toward her out of the low sun with his shadow thrown long entire. The one love had never asked the other's leave nor paid it rent. She had room in her for the man she had buried and the man she had chosen both at once. The having of both made her more, not less, the way a second child makes a mother's heart bigger, not smaller. John would have liked him. That was her last discovery, and the sweetest. The two of them would have argued fence lines all winter, happy as kings. The claim was safe now, his claim, hers, the whole joined run of it. That mattered, and she never once pretended otherwise. But standing in the gold stubble she knew, the way you know weather, that it was the smallest of the year's crops. Land can be got anywhere in Nebraska, by anybody with a filing fee. What had grown here grew once in a life. Away down the draw the supper bell went, rung by a small hand with authority. The two of them turned from the field together, unhurried, the way people turn toward plenty. Michael reached her, and they stood together at the field's edge without talking, in the way of people who have gotten past needing to. The light went long over everything the year had done, the stacked grain, the soddy lamplit in its fold, the fence running tight away northeast over the hills toward the frame house, and the rise with its white crosses. Away southwest, the little dip where the creek bent nearest, and out of it Danny bringing the milk cows up to the bell. The whistle of the evening train came up faint from Loup Crossing, miles off, going west. Both of them heard it. Neither of them said anything, but Lily's hand found her husband's hand. The two of them stood listening until the sound died over the hills. Both were thinking of a raw spring morning, a crowded hall, a screaming child, a boy with his jaw set like a fist. An orphan train had come through this county once and done a cruel thing in it. It had torn 2 children in half in front of 100 witnesses. The pieces it had carried off in 2 directions and called the ledger square. It had reckoned without the children. By a boy's stubborn love, 10 miles of dark walked over and over. By a girl's barefaced hoping, beetles and stolen watches. And by a fire, a flood, 2 broken grown people mended in the mending of them. So the cruelty had been worked backward, knot by knot, until this. Supper noise in the fold of the hills, grain in the stack, 4 names on one gate. The train whistle faded west, hauling its freight of other lives to other counties. Through the gold light, the family it had made by accident went in together to supper. 2 children had been torn in half at Loup Crossing. In the end, the 4 of them had mended one another. and all four were whole.